start the finance meeting now. It's 6:32, and I appreciate everybody being here. And this meeting is taped by Holyoke Media. It's Wednesday, June 25th, and I make a motion that Counselor Givner will not be here tonight, but she's not Zooming in, so we don't need to do that thing. And I'm assuming Counselor Ocasio will probably be here, I don't know, but...
I believe so.
Okay.
Running behind.
And we have Attorney Bissonette and John Kevalevich. So the first item on the agenda, I make a motion that we take that up. It's ordered there be and hereby appropriated by transfer in fiscal year 2025, $3,075 as follows. Reference library assistant, Maria, you can come in if you want, and to custodian, 1025, financial, we just started. Financial manager, 850, and computer coordinator, 1,200, for a total of $3,075. So just hit the microphone there and tell us what you need it for.
To meet the payroll obligations.
Anybody have any questions for Maria?
Why are those short, Maria?
Yeah.
Was there not enough in the budget for those items?
The financial manager, the previous one that we had was part-time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Was part-time, and then when I asked for the budget for a full-time person, I did not get the full amount. And then she turned out to be working full-time. She couldn't do it just in the part-time because we needed to do a lot of catch-up in the financial piece.
Okay.
So in order to put us up to date with the financial, so she ended up with working 35 hours instead of just 25.
And you had extra in your reference
Yes.
assistant?
Yes.
Okay. And this is all from within your budget, so?
Yes, I'm not asking for new monies. Yeah.
Yep. All right.
And it's in within the personnel to personnel.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Do I hear a motion that's been
Motion to approve the transfer.
Second.
approved? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
I'd also like to welcome Counselor Vacan and Mayor Garcia. I think.
You're all set.
Thank you.
Thank you. That
Thank
was
you.
short. Okay, item number 2, ordered that in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, the City Council hereby accepts the provision of the DOE Energy Efficient CDBG 76,420 no-match grant and authorizes the establishment of fund. Yoni is not able to be here today, but we just got a message from him not too long ago. We do have some information that he wrote, and that the City of Holyoke has been awarded $76,420 in a formula funding from the U.S. Department of Energy through the Energy Efficiency Community Development Block Program. Primary activities for this award are anticipated to include LED lighting upgrades at either the City Hall Annex, DPW, and the Holyoke Police Department building. The city has opted for a voucher option that will cover the cost for the new LED fixtures and labor associated with the installation and disposal of the old fixtures. The work will be performed by an electrical contractor and take place in collaboration with the DPW and the HG&E. The Office of Conservation and Sustainability respectfully requests your approval of $76,420 to fund these efforts. And then everything is attached with, people should have that. Any questions or things that are in here that you might, Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah, Yoni's not here to answer this, but I'm just curious about the timing on this. We were awarded this grant on December 31st, 2024. And I'm just wondering why it's coming before us 6 months later.
Yoni did say that if you need him tomorrow, or if you want to
No,
email him at all.
It's not something I feel to hold up
Okay.
moving and accepting it. I'm just wondering why we delayed 6 months to get going on
Yeah.
it. So,
Jeffrey, maybe you could make a note to check with Yoni tomorrow about that. We'll approve this tonight, but That's a good question to have answered.
Yep.
Okay, so.
Motion to approve.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so item number 3 is, oh, that was item number 3. No,
No, that
we
was
got another
2.
one, yeah. So ordered that in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, the City Council hereby accepts the provision of the FY '25 Mass Department of Fire Services Safe and Senior Safe Grant, 979985, no match grant, and we have Chief Cavalevitz here. So if you want to tell us a little bit about that, Chief, please feel free
Yeah,
to.
this is the grant we usually get every year. It's used for student awareness fire education. Basically, it's money we use for, we use it to do the backpack event, the Safe Neighborhood initiatives. We use it for financing of the materials we use during Fire Prevention Week, the coloring books, the pencils, the helmets they give away. They do car seat check events. They do some train-to-trainer programs. And then it's also for the Senior Safe program where, we'll do events, we go into their homes and do checks for them. And then we also do some events at the senior center, and she gets things that she can give away, like safety things she can give away at the senior center when she has her events.
Okay. And who is she?
Lieutenant Pelchar.
Okay, that's what I thought. Questions, anybody?
No. Motion to approve.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, Chief, you're all set.
Thank you, counselors. Have a good
Okay.
evening.
Yep.
You too. All right, so I don't see Meg, though, McGrath-Smith, but I'll take up item number 4. If she, I hope she comes in because it's her order, but McGrath-Smith ordered that the City Council review the FY '26 paving program memo and consider how best to address our most pressing road work. Victoria is here. The mayor obviously must want something to say because you've got your computer ready. But Victoria's here. Mary, I don't know if you're involved in this at all, but please feel free to come in and sit down. And Jeffrey, we just lost, oh, here he goes. This is the paving program. See, it's up there. Carmen, either way. Okay, so where do you want to start? Yeah, hit the microphone. Yeah. It'll turn green.
Okay. Thank you. I did put together a little deck slide to try to help guide the conversation here, and summarize sort of the key points on that were also conveyed in the memo that was sent. So I guess we can go to the next one. Where is Jeffrey? Where is Jeffrey? Oh, okay. Okay, good. So the key things that we would talk about are the current pavement conditions, sort of the long-term asset management plan related to pavement, the funding sources that are available, and then finally the streets that are selected for fiscal year '26 paving.
Oh, you've got it? We've got it there? Everybody
You
got
can
it?
go to the next slide. Thanks.
Okay.
So right now, there's about 130 miles of roadway, of city-owned roadway in Holyoke. And the average road surface rating, which is a way to sort of assess number of cracks, whether they're longitudinal, alligator cracks, that kind of thing. The average road surface rating is 71.9. So 100 would be perfect pavement, 0 would be terrible. So did do an analysis sort of also by ward, and you can see where everything fits today, with Ward 1 and 4 being lower than the citywide average.
Why would that be, Victoria?
What?
That they were lower?
That's just a condition assessment. So
Okay.
and I think also Ward 7 at the current time. So it's really just, I mean, again, just a metric to give you in
Okay.
terms of when we're comparing, because eventually you'll see what it's really coming down to. We can't pick a lot of streets, so how do you pick them? And people have legitimate complaints, and how do you prioritize them? So
Yeah.
just trying to, from a ward perspective, that's one way to look at it. And And that's where pavement stands today. In
Okay.
terms of
Patty,
the
can I ask a
estimate.
question?
Yes,
on
go
that?
ahead.
Yeah.
Counselor Jordan has a
yeah.
question.
Victoria, I'm assuming RSR is some sort of national benchmark or metric that you're using, this 71.9 rating?
Yep, so the city has been using Beta Group as the consultant to do pavement assessments, and the industry has sort of evolved it. Certain consultants
we
use
just started.
pavement condition index, et cetera. But yes, there is, they all follow, depending on where you go, the same sort of general criteria. Longitudinal cracking for a certain percentage of the roadway gives this
Sure.
X number, whatever, and then it tries to give you that calculation of where the road stands. Ideally, a street that's a 70 is going to look generally as bad as another 70. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not imperfect, because nowadays they also, use like
Within
cars
reason,
and video. You know what I mean? And so there's always the possibility. It's not so much about that's a 68 number and mine's a 70, and I think that's worse. That's okay, sort
Right.
of. You know what I mean? It's compared to the 100, though, it gives you that general sort of where does it fall. And
100 would be a brand-new road.
100 is a brand new road.
Yeah.
Okay, and 0 is a dirt road with potholes in it, right?
Yeah, in
Okay.
theory, nothing should ever get to a 0, but yeah.
Yeah, theoretically. So I guess my question, though, why I asked that is, I'm just, for benchmarking purposes, I'm trying to understand how Holyoke rates. Is 71.9 considered a C? Is that considered about average for a community? How would that compare to what's the average in Massachusetts? Is it 72? Is it 61? And so vis-a-vis, if we did this average rating in Chicopee, Springfield, for example, where are they? I'm just trying to get a sense of Holyoke vis-a-vis our competitive neighborhood communities.
Okay, so it's not a piece of data that is like globally shared on like a DOT platform, because not everybody has to do that, right? I could tell you that from the communities that I've worked in that have used similar programs, both with Beta Group or with another consultant that uses the same type of thing, 71.9 is the average, is lower than other communities. Not drastically lower, though. Most communities use it to measure a benchmark from year to year. So to sort of aim towards a goal of having something in the 75 to 80 range, say, and then they almost track it. It's almost like a way to go, wait, hold on, we just put in this much money and the roads got worse over the last year, and then you start to see where you maybe picking the wrong roads because you're doing them at the wrong time, that kind of thing, to see how it's sort of
Okay.
improving. But I don't think it's much lower, but it is on the lower.
So Holyoke is, you would say, is average for Massachusetts, or maybe slightly below average, our road conditions compared to the average community in the state with this rating.
No, I think
Mary, you
I can't speak for all of Massachusetts in any way, and actually my geographic area is more I-91 related.
Okay, then how about just along I-91, like Springfield, Chicopee,
I
Greenfield?
don't know. I could do. I could ask.
Or maybe
if
you
they
could
have
follow
that
up
data.
with us.
But I do think that I've never seen anything less than a 70 in a community I've worked in before. if
Okay.
that helps.
All right, that does help.
Okay.
Yeah, okay,
Okay. You want
thank
to
you.
go ahead, Vicki?
Okay.
Victoria?
Okay, so the next graphic is sort of showing this typical pavement deterioration curve. So on one hand, on that red line, that's just your average street. You're going to start out at 0, at year 1 at the very beginning, and it's going to be in excellent condition because it's brand new paved. And then over time, it's going to fail sort of along that curvature, and you're going to start to see major issues. Again, the graphic is a little bit online, so it's not anything to be super specific, but, even with you like to think that pavement's going to have a 20-year life. This is sort of showing an expediting, but you can kind of see it's going to eventually deteriorate. But it stays in a generally good condition for the majority of that time, right? That red line there is in a good condition for, it's still at sort of fair for the first 10 years. But then between year 10 and 13, it's just it's all over. It's too late if you let it go. If you do proper treatments, which are sort of what those black lines that are coming off, if you really do crack filling at the time it would be recommended, if you really then do the thin overlay and the mill and overlay, you can extend where that deterioration curve is going to go. That fix doesn't get you all the way back to brand new. Maybe year one you're going to call it 100. It's going to degrade a little bit faster than it will be brand new pavement, but you can make it last a lot longer if you're doing the appropriate treatment at the right time. This is also an ideal world where you have money to do all of that, but so then on the next slide, some of the repair alternatives, and it says alternatives even though we're in New England, so there are many throughout the country, but realistically, for something that would be routine maintenance, where the average road surface rating is between an 80 and a 90, and really in Holyoke and in a lot of places around here, that's really just crack filling, like crack sealing the actual cracks. That cost is maybe about $5 a square yard.
We don't have this chart.
Just so you know,
you're
we don't
aware.
have this page, so, but we've got it up
Oh,
there.
we do have printouts of this. Since
Oh,
it wasn't
okay. That's the
circulated
one
in
page we
advance, and I'm
don't
sorry
have.
about
You'll
that.
email this around maybe through Jeff or to us?
Yes.
Okay,
She's got,
Sorry.
Mary's got it.
Oh, you have it?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Oh,
That way then
beautiful.
too, if you want.
Thank
to.
you kindly.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Meg. There we go.
Thank you. Okay.
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 Thank you
So,
very much.
that first one, it's the cheapest one. But when you pick the streets, you would be picking streets that some people could potentially say, that was just paved. Yeah, well, okay. And it's starting to show cracks, and now's the time. So you start out where the cost at that very beginning to sort of prolong the line, that's only $5 a square yard. Then you get to preventative maintenance, which is like chip seal. I think we did microsurfacing, maybe Holyoke did in the past. Thin overlay, that's in, again, these are just general ideas of the range of when you would do these. Each street is case by case, but that's about $12 a square yard. Okay. Then you get into this minor rehab category, which is where a lot of our streets or Holyoke streets have now sort of gotten, where now you have to do a mill and overlay. And the cost for that is about $28 to $50 a square yard. And that depends on the thickness of the mill and overlay. So that 28 to 50 equates to a 2-inch mill and overlay versus a 4-inch mill and overlay. Part of the reason you may choose the 4-inch mill and overlay is you may have the road may have gone so far that you have cracks that are more than 2 inches deep. So a 2-inch mill and overlay doesn't solve your problem anymore. It could also be a very highly traveled road. Your collector roads, your arterial, your homestead, those are going to be at another, at that same level where if you're going to be touching it at all, you know what I mean, that would maybe be the time. And then you get
I'm
into
sorry, but brand
Yeah.
new is how thick?
a brand new road. If it was a residential road, I feel like from a normal subdivision, I'd have 8 inches of process aggregate base and 4 inches of pavement.
Okay. And how about a busy street like High Street or something? Would that be would be thicker than 8? Just to give us some perspective.
The only one I could, let's see, where would we have a road? We don't know on that one. Have you ever been on Day Hill Road in Windsor? Okay, that's 9 inches of pavement. I don't
Okay.
know how to give you like a
Yeah, just something to
thing,
gauge
like a
by.
2-lane highway type thing.
Okay.
Depending on when you start to have heavy traffic, you could get up there. You know what I
Got it.
mean?
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, it's just I'm sorry that I haven't been here long enough to
Hear the name of the street.
have experienced the
This is
projects and have them keep
Hard to hear.
in my
What was
brain
the name of the
somehow.
street?
She was referencing Day Hill, and it's not in Holyoke. It's in Windsor, Connecticut.
Oh, Windsor, Connecticut. Okay.
It is a road that like lots of people have actually
Yeah,
been
it's
on.
a-
Like
yeah.
it's not a totally wild ask, but so then you get to major reconstruction, and that's obviously $100 plus. I think it could be substantially more on a case by case basis. And we have the current backlog. So these numbers actually come a little bit out of the Beta Pavement Management Group, which I think is a little bit light, so I think your actual numbers would be a little bit higher than this. But based on sort of that banding range of what they believe sort of falls in that category of what falls in the category of now's the time to do routine maintenance and preventative maintenance, that's how you have sort of the breakdown of the streets. And you can see, between preventative maintenance and minor rehab, that's the majority of your area there. But they could be using slightly different, numbers. And that would be their guess. If you use today's dollars, that's how much it would cost you to get perfect pavement. I'm not going to stand by that number. I think it would be more than that. But again, relative ideas. They also did, if we go to the next slide, in their report, a forecast model where they took sort of Holyoke's current RSR, and they said if you put in different various amounts of money each year for the next 5-6 years, this is how you could maybe improve or maintain your current average road surface rating. So on the side where you see 4.75, 3.75, 2.75, one comment would be for super mathematicians. I would assume this is going to be 4.75 this year, and then next year it'd be 4.7 times your inflation, and then the next year and the next year, okay? But in order to that middle line, which still goes down a little bit, but is slightly, is generally along that 71.9 range by the time you get to September 2029. They estimate that you need to put in at least $2.75 million just to maintain that average rating. So like if next year you kind of kept this up with the pavement sort of summary in terms of things, and you said, well, where's our pavement thing now? My guess is it's going to be lower than 71.9 with what the funding is available. You know what I mean? And you would sort of see how that pans out. So that's just sort of the lower you get down, the worse it's going to get to sort of ever bring it back up too. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
And this also, it says amount is equivalent to FY '25, Chapter 90
yeah, I was
allotment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I do go into sort of where that funding is later from that funding source, but we do get about 1.1 million of Chapter 90. There's a different breakdown, but if you were to spend a full $1 million of that Chapter 90 money here, I mean, it's going down still if there's not an alternate, funding source.
What's our current aggregate per year that we're spending on pavement?
I think it's been about $1 million a year. I think there was a gap because there was a time, like in the staff shift, it was like off a year or something like that. So it's hard to go back and.
So we're basically doing just the Chapter 90.
We've only spent Chapter 90 money. So unless it was a roadway project that was funded through the state tip program or something like that, if it was just through the one that the city puts out in paving, it's my understanding that over the last at least 5 years, the only money that has gone into that is coming from Chapter 90. So it is probably less than,
So I believe, though, we have been trying to sort of, as we're doing these projects, pick up on, like High Street was really in tough shape. And then to the mayor's credit, he made this a priority to get High Street done. And that's obviously, I don't know if that was Chapter 90 or if that was a project funds. What would be an example of like High Street, Mayor?
High Street was a 1.5-inch overlay, which is, and I think she's going to get into it, but it's, it's a temporary,
Okay.
right? It's going to last 3-4 years maybe before you start seeing it and where the funding source came from is a good question. Was it Chapter 90 or was it some I know Bob Parent worked his magic and figured it out. But it was much cheaper to do a 1.5-inch overlay than it was. And when we had met with Victoria, she educated us on like you can do 1.5 inch overlays so much until I think Lincoln Street is a good example. You know, where it just won't, you'll do it, it'll look good for the less than first year, and then it just starts crumbling much faster, and that's when you have to start investing in that 4-inch or 3-inch, or then you got FDRs, and you know, it's so many different paths forward. But
So,
Do you have a question or no? Yes?
and I can certainly look into any of the history type questions. I just felt, last year filling in, I didn't get a ton of questions. But over the last year, I've gotten a lot of questions about which streets to be paved, and I was like, oh, this is not going to be good. Let me so let me put together sort of the reasons why and what would go into it and what sort of the limitations are so that you can see it. You know what I mean? And so it was me trying to piece together things that I know, and this stuff. So.
Counselor Ocasio has a question, or?
This question is kind of like for the mayor. Now that we are going to be having that project on High and Maple, that's going to lower the money that we have to invest in these streets to redo them over on, how does that work?
No, because that's a TIP funded project, and that's what Victoria was talking about. Like, aside from the available Chapter 90, there has been roads that have been done using things like the TIP program that do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's another reason why Bob Parent went with the 1.5 inch overlay, because there's the High and Maple project that's coming in the near future. So it's getting us good right now, and then in lieu of this later project that's going to be complete reconstruction. So it worked out well. But no, it shouldn't. That project shouldn't tap into this funding source she's talking about. That's going to impact other roads to be done.
Yeah. And I made a note, so when I get to the funding part, there's one more part to add to that, but I feel like it'll fit in that other
Thank you.
piece.
Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah. So if I understand what we're looking at here, if we continue to spend only $1 million a year, right, which is what we're spending now, our road surface rating is going to continue to deteriorate,
Yes.
right? And as it deteriorates, the cost of repair is going to escalate from $2 to $5 a yard to $100 a yard.
Yes.
And if we start spending the $2 to $5 more right now on the preventive maintenance, we can extend the life from 5 years, well, before it starts to deteriorate, out to 25 years, right?
Yep.
And that's showing it in 3 jumps, right? And I know there's going to be some inflation over the next 20 years. I get that. But even factoring in inflation, we're talking $2 to $5 3 times. So let's take $5 as the high number, 3 times for 15 bucks total, extending the roads out 20 years as opposed to $100 to get them absolutely nowhere. You add another 2 years life or 1 year's life to them.
Well, if we go back to, Jeffrey, I don't know if you could go back to that slide that had the red line graphic, the curve. So, when you look at it from sort of that funding level each year, essentially, say like you looked at it and you said, all right, well, our average street is about the point of where it says 10 years of pavement. And you're like, uh-oh, our average, you know what I mean? Like your average street is also at that part where it's going to go down faster. If that makes any sense? So that's one way to look at it from an average standpoint. It's going to go down faster. Now, if you were to implement sort of more strategized timing of these improvements, and please note, many other communities, I have seen streets that are crack-filled that are far beyond crack filling in many more places than Holyoke, right? Like, you do what you have to do. That's, there maybe feels like no other option. But as long as the holdback isn't, that street was already paved. That is the time to start to be like, that is where we're putting the crack filling in. You know what I mean? Like, you just can take one baby step with that first crack filling measure, where you say, instead of trying to seal together roads and get into it on like Homestead, where half of the claims are, let's do it on the streets when it's actually in the thing, instead of trying to piece it together. And then we're going to use the rest of the money to sort of piece it together, or coming up with sort of alternate funding sources to sort of supplement it and sort of try to catch back up, so that then you can sort of go on that same path. It's not perfect. It's really meant to be, if at the end when you see the list of streets to be paved wasn't convincing enough, it's meant to also give some convincing information that you may want to consider pursuing in even more than a street by street perspective from a pavement standpoint, or to at least know that that is just simply why some of the streets can't be done and why some of the pavement's not going to be done. You know what I mean? So I think there is a part when we get to funding that we could probably come back to the question too.
But the bottom line is, right now, we're on with the money we're spending every year, we're going to continue on a down slope. And that down slope is going to accelerate if we don't start spending more money now.
Yes, I can
Okay,
comfortably
that's-
say that. Yes.
In a nutshell, what we're looking at. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. So now the one that has like the word cloud. Thank you so much. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so this was like a word cloud of where the claims were. So a lot of, again, throughout the year, I've gotten a lot of, think about this street, think about this street. One of the issues is where the claims are happening. So Homestead Ave, largest font, that's where we have seen the most claims in the last, I can't even remember if it was the last 2 years, I probably have it cited here, but I did ask the solicitor's office and DPW staff to kind of go through that list of where they all were. Half of the ones that are on Homestead Ave are also in the part of Homestead that was crack filled in the very recent past. I think it was, I mean, I know it was before, but I think it was was it 2023 maybe? But in any event, I think it was 2022 or 2023. And that still has the highest claims. In which I guess I'm making the point that maybe that wasn't the street to use the crack filling on. You know what I mean? They're also, if you notice, the more major roads, because they're the more heavily traveled roads, they have more traffic volume, so there is some truth in that. They're going to be the ones that, just by merely being more traveled, they would be subject to more claims. Does that make sense?
Yep.
But a combination. But if someone, and I think I touched upon in the memo, Public Works has to go and respond to these potholes right away, right? Like, once you are notified of the claim, you have to go and you have to fix it. Well, they spend about $50,000 a year on the potholes. Now, that may or may not factor into somebody's decision as to whether or not that means that's definitely the street that should be paved, but there is a cost associated with it, and so I wanted to kind of throw out, in terms of there are a number of things that could lead you to how you want to prioritize the streets, that would be one potential consideration.
Could I ask a question on
Yep.
that? Well, yeah. Victoria, one of the things, and I think we're getting to it, is that we have this $1 million of baseline Chapter 90 money, but I also see, like, for example, East Hampton Road on here, but a large swath of that was recently repaved, and I'm assuming that was part of a big project all around the former Lynch School, up both ramps. It was all complete, and that section of Northampton Street was all done. So why I bring that up is, what I'm observing is we need to calculate the projects that we're leveraging and what's the value on street value for all of those, in addition to the 1 million. So the point is, we've got $1 million baseline, plus we do $1 million a year in these various projects that are in addition. And so is it really 2 million a year we're investing? I mean, it's probably still a delta, but the point is that it might be, the 1 million might be deceivingly low, because I'm just thinking like, that's another project. And then Hamden Street was redone as part of a project, I think, maybe perhaps.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can, yes. I totally want to put that on a hold till we get to the money part on that
Okay, yeah.
cost part, as it ties in, because I feel like then I'm jumping ahead without the right
Because
background.
I'm
But yes,
planting the seed
okay,
so I don't
totally.
lose it, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, that High Street, by the way, I was just looking up some old emails. It's the WRAP, Winter Recovery Assistance Program,
Oh, interesting.
through Governor Charlie Baker. Supplemental funding for cities and towns to improve their transportation networks in response to harsh winter weather. It
Excellent.
supplements Chapter 90, but it's not Chapter 90. Not
Winter
part of Chapter
recovery.
90. Winter Recovery Assistance Program, I
Thank you.
believe, is the
WRAP,
funding source that we
WRAP.
use for High Street.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Yeah, I had it. It was like 300 and something
Counselor
thousand.
Sullivan?
Hold on.
Yep. So, also looking at this, I'm looking at the breakdown on the 1.1 million. Traffic evaluations in support of city council orders.
Oh, yeah.
$75,000, right? In support of,
Can we go to, I will totally get to that, I think. Can we
Yeah,
go
we're
to
not
like
there
the
yet.
2 next slides? Because I feel like some of the questions are almost like, I'm gonna get that and then whatever, so I'm like answering them beforehand. Okay,
We're stealing your thunder, sorry.
or I just want to like have it be cohesive, I guess.
Yeah.
So right now, what I have seen, again, and I've had to do a lot of fact-finding missions of files and things like that, but the funding that I've seen for the city's road paving program, not the separate projects, I mean, is mostly Chapter 90, which you get about $1 million a year. It's variable. I suppose someone's gonna be like, it's 1.053. Maybe, I'm just saying, from a conservative estimate, it's about $1 million, okay?
fine. Yep.
You get a little bit more, but not tons more. Then there's this other new thing that's fair share. Now, in fiscal year 24, it was like $400,000, but in fiscal year 25, it was only $225,000. So I don't know enough about that program as to like why it would go down so drastically. I think it's a newish program, right? Yeah, and we don't find out about it. So I also went through like old emails that weren't even my old emails to see like when we got notified of some of the things, and on both fair shares and rural roads, the city wasn't even notified what that amount would be until anywhere between December and April of the next year. So like there's one other one, rural roads, that we get, the city's gotten about 49,000. That's generally, it could be the exact or very close. Both fiscal year 24 and 25 were like 49 something. But the idea is like, no, I don't think you're gonna find out what fiscal year 26 money is until December to possibly April of next year for those two things, right? So you won't know what fiscal year 26. So that's the majority of it. And then there are other funding sources like the State Transportation Improvement Program, which is the program that Mass DOT does where Center City is under that program. High End Maple is under that program. The Future Beach and Resnick Street, that is under that program. There's also the Municipal Pavement Program, which is the one that did East Hampton Road. My guess is that those claims on East Hampton Road, my hope is that those claims on East Hampton Road fell in that range of, I was pulling statistics and they're from right before it got paved, but it still fell in the 2 years I was assessing or something. And then there's also sort of a Complete Streets program that could cover it. I don't know what the Winter Recovery Assistance Program is. I will also look into that. Again, this is like the first, the one-time deal. Okay. Because like I said, or I don't know if it's like I said, but majority of what I've done is in Connecticut, so I just want to be like full disclosure. I may not know all the nuances of it. I mean, pavement's still pavement, but in fairness. So, as Councilor Jordan was saying, there is some truth to that. You aren't only maybe putting in $1 million a year by using just Chapter 90. There is money that is somehow being spent from these programs. But I'll give two caveats. One, a road project done under those programs is a lot more expensive than a road we would do ourselves, okay? There's like inflation, extra, now it's gotta be this feet wide, now you got right-of-way property impacts, add new sidewalks, add in bike lanes. We wouldn't maybe do that ourselves. So I think we had assessed it for, say, even potentially Main Street, and it was almost twice as much if it went from a project that would be in the tip to a project where you were just sort of rehabilitating the pavement within the existing curb line. So it was something like, yeah, if you have 10 million, but the problem is the city maybe doesn't have $10 million to do it. So there's that. So those programs also drive up the cost. So you're not going to get the same bang for your buck, right, on it. There's also a piece that in some of these programs, there's the nuance of on the transportation improvement program, the city is asked to pay for the design and for the rights-of-way activity. Now, what I have seen is that on the Center City project, for example, there was a design consultant between the design and the right-of-way activities is in the, I don't know, $100,000 range when you add up all the fees, but almost $1 million has been spent on Center City and the design, whatever. But for some reason, like, it was spent out of Chapter 90. So it started out with, here, start the 25% and here's $200,000-$300,000, and then they went to the next phase, and then they went to that. So I don't know, maybe people were afraid to bring it to you. I have no idea, but now from a construction standpoint, the project is, I think, maybe almost $8 million. Again, I like to fact check numbers before I quote them. So there is some water line work, so I feel like there's another alternative you could look at it as almost 10 million, but water might be paying for that, so then it's not fair to count it. But in any event, that's not a bad return on the $1 million, okay? Like, that is very good. However, if the money wasn't like appropriated from like that specific project, so that is when things like that are happening, it's eating away from the Chapter 90 money that would be going towards the pavement, even though it looks like it was happening in an incrementally small pieces here and there. You know what I mean? It wasn't a big hit. I can also tell you that right now, Chapter 90, because of the thing, like, sometimes it feels like there's a backlog, right? You don't want to plan. It's almost not a huge backlog. It's less than a year's worth of backlog, but you know what I mean? It's like this little buffer. No one wants to spend their full every last dollar and have there be zero. You know what I mean? But it's like if you just are planning to spend everything that's there. So in any event, thought could also be given to when projects like that happen, that the community, who like there is maybe a value to be seen in coming up with or truly identifying another funding source for that design phase, because you know what you're getting back from it instead of having it, you know, sort of taking away from that overall. You can also do it. I mean, money's got one bucket versus the other. If they all ultimately get divvied up from the other one, I mean, who knows? But just food for thought. So then when we go to, hold on, I just want to make sure, because I know you said something about.
Victoria, this is strictly for roads, not like parking lots or something like that? Or
For
that?
roads, yeah, so Chapter
just
90
road.
is like road, like right-of-way type stuff, so
Okay.
wouldn't be like a municipal parking lot, right?
All right, we'll do that another time.
So then if we go to the next slide, so, and this one is not like, this is not a definite thing. This is, again, from what I've seen. So if someone asked me to holistically look at it and I go, all right, you have about $1.1 million of Chapter 90. Many things come in to the engineering department so far that they've seen in council orders in a variety of things, and I'll go, where's the money that comes from that? And no one has the money, or many times people say, that can just come from Chapter 90. And they go, I don't know if people realize that they're spending Chapter 90 5 times. Like, it seems like maybe that is not there. So for example, this was like almost like, I guess if you had this ideal world, or if I was really supposed to cover all of these things from chapter 90, and they're all items, whether the number is correct is not the point, but they're all items that people are asking, and I've seen people ask Engineering Public Works to spend with chapter 90 money. There's some more that I didn't even include, but, so for example, the other consultant services, $100,000. If I were to put that in the budget, that'd be low for what I think people are asking to spend consultant services out of chapter 90. There's all sorts of things where it'll be like, that's minor, just chapter 90. Oh, that's this, instead of, coming up with a different way. Some minor traffic signal repairs, not like the ones that are a little bit more than what the fire department is doing, you know what I mean? But still, that might need to come out of here, and I feel it could be asked. There are a lot of traffic council orders of speed humps and traffic data and all sorts of things, and I know that's a whole nother topic, and I think there are some cost-efficient ways that could do it. Of course, you would need staff to do it, but nonetheless, money to support those would come in, and so there is such a backlog of locations that would be coming from to do just the traffic data, never mind the installation, right? But I guess if somebody, and I don't know who, right, I'm sort of if the thought was that the money is supposed to come out of chapter 90, okay, well then that would have to be deducted, right? Or does it come from somewhere else? I don't know. Sidewalks. The only money I've ever seen for sidewalks is if it's in a CDBG area. And that was also a little bit of a learning curve, right? Like someone went right in, the sidewalk's really bad. So then we go and we look at it. And we also have through one of the ADA grants, Veda Group also did some sidewalk assessment. So we have all of like the sidewalk conditions, the same way we have like pavement too. So they may have said, oh, there's this issue, and then somebody went and looked at it, and we went, okay, cool, we'll add it to the list. Yeah, well, maybe what should have maybe been clarified, the list of areas we know we want to address, but then the next year comes, and it's like, where is that street, where is that sidewalk being done? And then, in some cases, I wish I had known better to be like, and by the way, that's not in the CDBG area, but you know what I mean? That misunderstanding. And then I thought to myself, when do you ever do them? Is the only time when you have a roadway project that's maybe not in that area? So if you were to say chapter 90 money was coming out of, for non-CDBG areas, was also supposed to come out of chapter 90, that's how that would sort of deduct from it. And then the thought was at that point you don't really have a ton of money. So if you were to say $100,000 of what's remaining is going to go to pavement, I called it pavement preventative maintenance. That's going to go to like crack filling, and it's going to go to the streets that people are going to say that was just paved, but we're going to do it the right way, and we're going to spend $100,000. You still have $675 to do all the rest. And as we get to the next slide, you will see that it doesn't necessarily get super far.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Victoria, in the good old days on sidewalks, and I know sidewalks are a lot narrower than a street and probably less intense and less expensive than doing street, but historically, and by the way, it's actually been quite a while since anybody's come into us to ask for sidewalk money. I don't know how you guys are doing it for whatever you're doing for sidewalks, so God bless you, because we don't get too many requests for sidewalk money. But in the good old days, usually what we would do is pull from reserves. We would get a list of the problem assessment list, like you seem to have compiled, and they'd say, give us $500,000 from reserves and we're going to put it on here, or give us $1 million. And that's how we usually would chunk away at the sidewalks. I haven't seen any of those type of requests in a long time. So I don't know what's the strategy on sidewalks. Not really the focus of this, but since you brought up sidewalks, it's basically the kissing cousin of the pavement issue. So I did want to just raise that. If there is that assessment, you might want to share that with the council and the mayor, and we probably have to develop a plan around sidewalks too.
Okay. Yes, I think, think you probably do know that when I started with the city, I was like, okay, I can do it for 2 months till I have the baby, and she's now 1.5 years. So there was a time in which we were like, well, it's not mine yet, it's not mine yet. But eventually it's hard to like not take ownership and want to solve the problems, even though I can't answer of what happened in the past before, and I don't know, and someone else could be like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to piece together. So it's
Yeah.
like some of it I'm maybe not necessarily coming to you with an answer, but it's like there maybe could be an answer coming from it, but at least it's bringing it out now, because it's not, some of these things are not obvious to me, like where it is supposed to come from. So in this sort of aspect, I was trying to, really the whole point of this chart was to kind of give the idea of this is how like little miles you can do with that budgeting. And it's not going to be drastically changed by going up to the 1.1 million, right? But if I were to, with the crack filling, I might get about a mile worth of roads with that. With mill and overlay, and I'm using the average of 39, I might get 1.1 miles of roads. Now that's before I have new bid pricing. So the bid for the next 3-year contract has been advertised, so we'll get those and we'll see. But that means like only 1 to 1.5% of city-owned roads can be resurfaced each year. People's individual ask lists are much more than that, and that they almost recognize it's only supposed to be some, and it's far greater. So let's see. So then I think there was a list in the memo of stuff, and I wanted to just share with some of what could be highlighted and how it was selected. So I think there's discussion that could be had in terms of how you want to prioritize what streets to do, right? I could make the case that the ones that are highly traveled have more users that benefit from it, etc. I can also tell you that the local, like the collector and the arterial roads, those are the ones that can actually qualify for some of those other programs, right? So the state tip program, the municipal road program, I think can only be state numbered roads, and then the transportation improvement program, I think, is still at a collector arterial type level. So while those do have more users and they deteriorate faster, there's also more opportunity for maybe another funding source. Whereas your local dead end street has no real other funding source. That's not going to be eligible for those programs. So the list of what was sort of on that and what is highlighted, and I tried to do a more summary of what they would be on this as well, really focused on road surface rating with a priority given to the wards that showed that their average pavement condition was lower than the average, that eligibility for potential alternate funding. Some of the streets that maybe could have been on there would have had a note on the pavement memo that, we reached out to utilities. So they see like the whole long list to see what feedback they have. Is it like many laterals they need to do, or is it just 2 and we could ask them to do it in advance? But you could prioritize traffic volume or road claims. So in that sort of aspect. When we get to the next slide 2, I tried to factor in and I tried to forecast out. So we have some upcoming projects. So the upcoming projects that I talked about in the memo, River Terrace, right? It's a sewer separation project, but at the end, we're gonna mill and pave those streets, okay? It's not under our road program, but they'll have good streets. So I counted that, right? Like, even though it's not the pavement program, I went through that. I went through the High and Maple, you know what I mean? Those streets that are going to be here. And what if I incorporated all of that? Where would the wards still stand? You know what I mean? Because if someone says, well, it is fair because they're getting this. It still almost showed that Ward 1 and 4 were lower than the average. So that is why you will see on the next one that priority toward 1 and 4. So then, on this last slide, which I understand you haven't seen, but essentially this last slide is from the pavement memo. There was like this option, you could pick the claims, and then I did give this super long list because this includes all of the streets that I feel like show up from a road surface rating issue as something that should be potentially considered. And while it doesn't have a footnote of who asked, it should ideally also include all of the asks I've gotten from various people, so that then they'd go, how much is this? And you'd have like the information. But really the blue ones were the ones that were kind of like, I know, again, I don't have like super strong opinions, but it's like using that criteria, those would be maybe the candidates. So those that were transferred onto like this slide, and the only reason I highlight those in yellow there is that, you know, between the time of the memo and trying to do some of the other stuff, it's like bid pricing may come in where we can't do that much. Maybe it comes in more favorably, right? Because we're kind of trying to estimate it. So it was like, again, this is what at the current moment we would propose as doing this year for fiscal year 26, with those yellow ones of the caveat that those would maybe be the first to have to postpone if they can't be done this year. I will also further say it should maybe not use postpone, but it feels harsh to say bumped, but I also don't like maybe using postpone, I guess, after all, because in the past, paving lists for more than 1 year have been published out to the public. And then the next year comes, and every year a new assessment should be done. Where do we stand now? Something changed, whatever. But people thought their street was going to be done this year. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like, I get it. I know why someone maybe didn't do it. They didn't say, you're not happening anymore. If it doesn't happen right now, right? If I said, if I don't have enough funding, those yellow ones, they're going to get bumped. That doesn't sound great, okay? But when I say postpone, now they might be upset if it's not next year, and next year they may no longer be the top priority. I don't know really how to maybe clarify that, but in any event, the last piece, which maybe should have tied in, is that in this current moment, and even in speaking with Meg too, like, so the pavement approach that had been taken to the mill and pave before I got here was about a 1.5 inch mill and overlay. And what I saw in the year that it went out to bid and I was doing it on, say, like South Street, there was a lot of money spent because when they took it up, the holes were still there. So there was this other like pay item to fill in all the holes with asphalt. So 1.5 doesn't really work for what you're doing. I've never done a 1.5 somewhere. So in that aspect, I would personally, but if someone wanted to argue it, like I would personally recommend that the minimum for some, when we're at this level, is a 2-inch mill and overlay. I get it. You could do the other one. You're going to get more miles. I just think that, I mean, you're not going to see it last as long. I don't know what that differential is. I can't foresee it, but I think using it, trying to focus on using it the most effective way could be beneficial at this stage. And then there are some where I've noted 4-inch mill and overlay. And that is because they are, some of them appear to have cracks that are more than 2 inches. So you would be in that same scenario. They need to be done, but when you mill and pave, by the time you do that, you're gonna have to pay for asphalt to fill the holes, and so you might as well just do it. And you will get, in some cases, when those are roads in the city accepted, it's gonna bring it down to the base. You may, if you were to totally remove the pavement in a particular situation, you could just supplement it with gravel. That's cheaper than the asphalt. And then you come back, and now you have, I mean, that would probably be a decent approach. But this is a guesstimate. This is like, how do you come up with a best guess assessment when you don't have the data that ideally you would have? Ideally, I would have geotech data. I would have someone that told me how much the base material was. It would be a very much more educated tell of what the treatment method would be. I think we've identified that, you know, a lot of the ones that were sort of other candidates that were on that collector type situation, I was gonna reach out to see if like someone could get, if I could get a cost estimate for how much it would cost to do a geotech, because especially if it was on a higher road, like a homestead, whatever, it would be worth fact checking. Does that 4-inch, whatever, maybe they go, yeah, that's cool. Maybe they do have something that's alternative, or maybe they honestly think whatever is totally remove it and put back 5 and that's perfect. And you're like, oh, good to know. Because again, if I'm going to touch it, I want to do it now. Like, my feelings won't be hurt if that comes back and it's slightly different. This is like, if I had no information, this is what I would kind of recommend. You know what I mean? For those streets. So that could kind of get ahead of where some of those other roads could be, especially because the more major you are, the longer the road probably is, the wider the road probably is. That's going to drive up the cost versus, the cul-de-sac type area. So all of that being said, and it does feel, as much as there was a presentation, it feels a little bit all over the place, but I really wanted to almost provide that background into what, and I do think some of these decisions were likely they were happening, sort of, but I just don't know if it was truly conveyed.
Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah, so Victoria, I'd like to go back to the question about traffic evaluations
Oh,
in
yeah.
support of council orders. That's not actual repair work. That's just evaluations in
That-
support of council orders.
That would be proposed, so that is almost like a proposed plan, right? Like, because here's the other thing. If right now I said, well, yeah, the pavement plan is based on, this is really what I'm getting at with that. Yeah, the pavement plan is based on 675 and whatever. And it's because I'm going to put 75 for the traffic orders because you need all the data assessment, because they get a ton of emails about where the speed hump is and people thinking that the speed hump thing means it's going to be installed. And I say, no, I have data, but then it's taking forever to get the data. So anyways, you would tell me right now, no, I want more money on pavement. I go, cool. And then when you ask me about the speed hump, I'll go, where's the money? You told me to take it out of here. I'm like, and now I don't have to, you see what I'm saying? Like, I just need to know. So if there's the expectation that I'm supposed to use that money to, and I say I instead of the department, but you know what I mean? If that's the expectation, then the expectation is that much pavement can't be done. But if you're like, ooh, this pavement, this is serious, and yeah, those other things need to go away, that's fine. There is no current contract to do any of that work. There's no, we could use our sidewalk person to do sidewalk repairs if we added money from that, especially because we didn't get CDBG funding for next year, so there is some like balance in the contract that would allow us to do that. But there's no contract for the traffic thing. It was just a thought of, if this is where it's going to come from, that would maybe be an estimate. I don't think 75 is going to get you through all those orders that are currently in backlog. But it would start.
Could you provide us a list of council orders that are just out there right now for evaluation?
I have a list. Jeffrey. No, I have a list of what I believe are the speed humps that I think is being circulated. And that list is just based on things that I've seen come across. But it's almost like then when all the ward counselors see them, someone might be like, oh, okay, Upland, it's on here. Okay, Laurel, it's on here. You know what I mean? Where they all are. But if there's somehow another street that should have been on there that is not on there, then I would maybe need to know, because this is not a list that I could ever find in the files. I tried to make the list because, again, someone would ask and I'd be like, what? There's other ones that if you went from a chronological are first. So there's that. So yeah, there's at least the one of speed humps.
The point I'm trying to get at is we're spending $75,000 a year on council orders for evaluations. We're only spending $100,000 a year on preventive maintenance. By the other chart, we see the more money we spend on preventive maintenance, the longer we extend the life of the existing the existing roads, right? And the less money we're going to spend in the long run, also.
So yes, we are not. You have not been spending, this 75 here is almost like this year, if you thought that future traffic evaluations are supposed to come from Chapter 90, I think that's maybe the budget you would have in place, but that is not what has been spent. There's no contract for it. I think I've seen there was a contract with VHB to do an assessment of certain things. I don't know where that money came from. It could have been like one of those things where it's like a one-time grant where there was a one-time thing. So it's not like this isn't just like always happening. The reality is what I've seen is every council order that's come in, I do not have a funding source to do it. And so if my only funding source is supposed to be Chapter 90, then as I do this pavement plan, I would be putting it aside in this little bucket that says, okay, we would start to check off some of those things on the list. But, you know, there's the list of speed humps, but there's also some four-way stop type, always stop things that maybe need assessments. Although DOT seems to be wanting to do a lot of those for us for free lately, so.
If I can butt in for a minute, sorry. Counselor McGrath Smith had a question, and then Counselor Bacon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to name that. I know that Councilor Bacon has an order in currently around revising the speed hump process, which I think makes a lot of sense for us to dive into, because right now we have a process that requires the petition, which is very resident driven. It causes them to put so much time into it that then they feel very strongly about getting it, and then nothing happens. Because we then have to come up with a funding source to get the traffic data to warrant the traffic humps. We have to make sure it's the right kind of road to allow it, and then we have to come up with the funding source for the speeding humps. And I think it makes a lot of sense to look at that process and potentially revise it. The one thing that I wanted to go back to that you had said earlier, when you went in and looked at the average weighted RSR and looked at the fact that there were some roads that were previously on last year's paving list, and saw that a 2-inch overlay or 1.5 would not serve those roads well. That's not what Lincoln needs. It has cracks that are deeper than 2 inches. Well, all of a sudden, a 1.5-inch overlay or 2-inch makes no sense, and the cost of paving it goes up to $700,000. So part of it too, I think, is, you know, to Councilor Sullivan's point earlier about where that dive starts happening. It's so tricky because what we know looking at that graph is that we need to be putting more money into crack sealing, into maintaining the roads when they're at good quality. But we also have this backlog of roads now that Lincoln is $715, Bemis is $643, plus a $75,000 for the speed humps. But that's an incredibly expensive road. So if we're only using Chapter 90 funding for some of these roads, and we only have $1.1 million, we could have a single road wipe that out entirely. When if we're looking at this proposed breakdown, and I appreciate the breakdown, I think it invites good conversation around if this is the right breakdown. But if we have $675,000 on average every year for paving management, we have roads we can't even cover, a single road, if we do it. And so as a result, we're not doing those. They're not on the list this year. Because how would we do them? So that invites a conversation, I think, for the finance department or a finance committee around what are we going to do around some of these roads that maybe, you know, we'll hear from this group that they can come in for the municipal paving program or STI or the complete streets or winter recovery assistance program. But if they can't, then our next year we're only paving one road or doing a half of a road, and the next year 2 more roads plus another half of that road, because some of them now need that 4-inch overlay, and now it's much more expensive than we had initially thought when we put them on the paving list. And I think we have to be honest with people around why we know your street needs to get done. We know it was on the list last year. It's not on the list this year because this is the funding source that we have, and we cannot pave the paving list now that we better understand how badly deteriorated these roads are.
I think with that too, you know, the city could go the way of, I really wouldn't say 1.5 is recommended, but you can, and you would not be the only community that would do a repair far after it's gone to patch it, just like maybe High Street under that program. The reality is it just could not survive that long while it waited, but you didn't want to wait. You want to do the full amount now, so you fix it for now, and that just stinks, but that's where it is. Some of it is, ideal situation. I don't think at the 2 4-inch mill and overlay, that's not like too out there in terms of everything can't be perfect. It's kind of like if you are going to touch those streets, I think it's probably safe to say you should do a little bit more. There's another part where I want to say Lincoln Street, because that brought up a thing. So the utility companies will ask for what that paving list is. So then it's also a little bit of a burn, because in the one time, so there's like a pavement cut moratorium. But then when you ask HG&E to, sign, okay, well, you're going to do all of the pavement, like curb to curb and stuff. It's like, oh, we don't have to do that. Okay. So that's hard. But then some of what they're doing is to be in advance of our paving. So then the argument could be, if Lincoln Street right now is cut because of the utility company, then the only reason the utility company did that was because they believed Lincoln Street was on our paving. So it's like, I can see why they would not say they want to pave it width to width, because they didn't do it, they only did it to be ahead of the paving. So I think there is that sort of coordination, teamwork piece with utilities that could also be had, because, they don't get the complaints.
Go ahead, and then, or Councilor Bacon, and then the mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, given everything that I'm hearing, I'm just going to go out on a limb and make a suggestion. If we have, and we know we have such limited funding, on the other hand, we have residents asking us to put in the queue streets to be repaved. And of course, their perception of their street needing to be done is different than yours. I let them know I'll put it on the list, but the assessment is done by DPW. So maybe what we could do is clarify process, right? That city councilors cannot request a street to be repaved. That's not in our wheelhouse. We don't have that authority, because that authority lies in DPW and the engineering department, and they have the expertise and the to make those determinations. Because I'm getting requests all the time. My street needs, I must have 10 or 15 or 20 of them on my emails, right? But truly, we can't affect that even happening. So it's almost a fake process to say, I let my ward counselor know. I can pass it along, but that's about it. And then the same thing with the speed hump requests. So when people come to me and say, we need speed humps on our street, I let them know, if it's eligible, which is the first thing you got to get over, plan on at least 3 years between figuring it out, finding the money, and getting it done. On the other hand, if we're sitting here looking at this and we know we don't have the money, I think perhaps the temporary better thing to do would be to say, if as of this date, we are not entertaining speed hump requests in the city because we don't have resources for them. So why even make people get their hopes up that they run around, do the petition? Even if we change it, you're still going to have 20 people sending over to DPW, assess our road for speed humps, right? So if we get rid of the petition process, you're probably going to get even more requests for assessments. So maybe the more straightforward thing to say is there's a moratorium on speed humps given our resource limitations relative to the roads, and we have to focus on the roads. I'm just throwing it out there because it's becoming kind of a catch-22, although for everybody,
So on one, there's not a formal process where people can believe they can petition a street to be paved, like they just vote and they get it added to a list, right? They just
No.
maybe think, okay.
No.
I was like, please don't tell me that's another ordinance that I don't know about. Okay. In some aspects, there is the idea that city staff is not driving on every street in the city of Holyoke. So the idea that someone in their community is like, hey, and then they reach out to their ward counselor and they say, what about XYZ street? That's fair. It's fair to go, okay, and look, should be a comfort level though, like the traffic data that gets done, while maybe every year the city isn't paying to have new assessments done, because, and some places don't. They do it once every 3 years, you know what I mean? They just it's like a deterioration curve that projects it out at that time. But every street, and I feel like I could speak for the people before me, every street was considered in the past, you know what I mean? It just maybe didn't feel like it because it wasn't picked, I don't know. But certainly, I hope they don't get the impression that just by saying it, their street somehow gets added to the list.
No.
But there's that. And then I think the traffic calming one is maybe, again, for sort of a future discussion. My feelings are, and I think it was Councilor Rivera that had said it one time, when they ask for speed humps, people really maybe mean they have a speeding problem. They have a perceived traffic issue. And I would really hate to say that there's a moratorium on voicing a traffic issue.
Right.
But I think for those of you that I have spoken to, I think it is misleading in terms of, and unfortunately causes a lot of work the way it is right now to get a petition first, when ideally they would be able to sort of voice that there's an issue in their neighborhood, some sort of assessment, could be done, it gets added to the queue. If there was more staff, maybe some of the data could get more readily, and then sort of lessen the burden on them and also the expectations, because the way it is right now, I definitely think people think the petition means the speed hump is going in.
All right. Mayor Garcia?
Thank you.
I would have never would never recommend to limit, or if communities members want to voice their concerns for a road or a speed hump, and they should reach out to their counselor. Definitely, what I love about people by the council submitting orders, it keeps us informed, it keeps information flowing, it keeps our finger on the pulse and where the needs are, where the issues are, even though we can't get to it immediately or whatever the limitations might be. Keep the orders coming. I wouldn't discourage that from happening. At least people feel like they're being acknowledged, they're being heard. So I wouldn't, but also I think the important part is that, and this is why I was thrilled when she came forward with this presentation and glad that this meeting is happening, it's educating the public on, here's why roads don't get fixed as fast. There is a system in place that rates conditions of roads, and on that system, depending on availability of funding and where your road is on, we educate the public on that, but still bring that information forward anyways, because again, it allows us to understand where the biggest concerns are, and it allows people to get their concerns acknowledged. On the speed humps, there is a grant that we leverage through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Coco, Councilor Givner, has been on that committee to bring on that consultant to help come up with a speed management plan that helps us, to your point, Councilor, rather than just a system where you say, get this petition, this is what, there are municipalities that have a great working system on their website in how, and it's treated more like a capital improvement plan for speed humps, right? Like it's, understanding where the speed management concerns are citywide, and then same way with the roads, prioritizing and chipping away at that list as funding becomes available to take care, rather than whoever knows how to get the petition first and advocate better and push the council politically to get a speed hump, and then try to figure out where the money's coming from. It's a little bit more strategic, but definitely keep bringing the information forward. I think that's important, and then we just have to prioritize accordingly and be realistic in what we can do and continue to educate the council so they can go back to their constituents and say, hey, here's where things are. So that we want to keep that system flowing. Can we go back to that slide, however, that showed the trajectories? If you spent this much, here's what you can expect in an upward trend versus a downward
Forecast
trend.
model.
I don't know if Jeffrey's in control, or is it what page?
Jeffrey, I think he's talking about the forecast model one.
Forecast.
The one with the red line, Mayor, that one?
The one with the 5 lines.
There's like
that,
5
shows different funding
Okay.
values. No.
Okay.
This one right
Success.
here.
Yeah, okay.
So this is interesting, and this is just kind of food for thought, counselors, and how we can figure out and work together. And maybe we don't resolve it tonight, and I'm happy to have one-on-one conversations if you have ideas. But according to this, if we want a somewhat flat or a somewhat upward trajectory toward improvement, we'd have to invest $3.75 million. And does that include Chapter 90 in there, or
Yeah, that would be your total money on.
that black line that has that kind of, that's an upward trend of improvement, right? I'm assuming. And then there's the 4.75, which is much more aggressive. So if it's $1 million and an additional 2.75 million, we can try to figure out, and again, I'm not saying we'll solve this tonight, but can we do 2.75 million a year for the next 5 years? Whether if it's looking at our borrowing capacity and borrowing 2.75 millions a year as debt rolls off, we borrow, debt rolls, you know what I mean? Or that coupled with free cash certification, or whether if we want a head start and tap into our reserves, some sort of plan we can agree to every year for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, that helps get us in a much better position to improve our road conditions and put us on a better trajectory. I think this is telling, and it helps us kind of make those informed decisions so that we can agree to a plan and stick to it so that we have a better road situation in the city of Holyoke. Just a food for thought.
Counselor Jordan and then Counselor Sullivan.
Victoria, on this chart, isn't the one in blue actually supposed to say 1.75 million?
Oh, yep. Yes, the bottom one.
Yeah, the second
No,
to the
it's-
second to the
Those
bottom.
one, I think you were talking about the 3.7, like the one that is correctly labeled, but the one that's above 1 million says 3.75, and that's a mistake, yeah. Also, I'll note that the 4.75 only projects to bring it to like a 74.5, so it's not like,
Right.
seems way more than level, but it's still low.
To the mayor's point, which is an excellent one, which is, how does this fit into the mosaic of capital? I think the answer is every one, and this is just my opinion, is every one of these requests is obviously these competing interests with a finite. So to answer your question, Mayor, I think it should be examined in a matrix of here's what we have for like over the next, say, 5 years, 10 years, right? Of what's our revenue projection, available dollars from all these various pots. And then it's, okay, sidewalks, CSO work, pavement, large vehicles, it could be, we got a $1 million fire truck coming up that we have to bond for, and all of these things to develop the capital plan. And then how does this fit? And so the answer is, if we got $1 million and we really need 1.75 more or 2.75 more per year, so let's just say that's 15 million over 3 years. Is that in the pie of available, or is it, yeah, we could do it, but now we don't get the fire truck and we don't get the sidewalks and it's going to be all, yeah. So we need a capital plan to your point. And, this should definitely be on the list of things for us to look at for sure. There was a chart previously, and I don't know if it was Bob that published it, but it was the roadmap rating chart. And it had a map of the whole city, and it had a score for every single street.
Yeah.
And it looked like, is that available? Or could that be published? Because I think that would be an educational tool on the DPW website for us to say, you know, hi, Kevin, it's Mrs. Jones, and I'm on Yale Street, and I think Yale should be paved immediately. I could say, well, here, Mrs. Jones, you know, you're in 82, but the average street in Holyoke is this, and here's why you're going to be in the second tier. So I think that what the more info we can put out to the public on these type of topics will also help with tampering down the request, because people will have like info to see where they fit into the grand scheme. And you could say, I'm sorry I didn't do Yale, but I had to do Davis Street, which I saw is on the list, which I know desperately needs to be done. That street is in deplorable condition. And you could say, well, Davis is a 42, but you're a 78. And that's why. But in 3 years, we're working our way to you. And that type of info, I think, really helps. If we could put that out there on the website. And even these type of presentations to the public, publish this stuff on your website under, you know, these broad topics, sidewalks, like you have an assessment on sidewalks, put that out there. People like the mayor or me or Meg or Linda or whoever, Patty, we can link to these things and share them on our social media. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, how many temporary sets of speed humps do we have available? Because one of the things that I think the city, I try to encourage is, should we get more of them? One time, I know urban legend is we have like 2 or 3 temporary sets. I don't know if that's even true.
I don't know.
Because what I try to do is, Kevin, I'd love to have speed humps on such and such. They're constantly speeding. There's kids on my street. They're all going to get killed if we don't do da. So I go, well, before you have the petition, or maybe before you go and really form an opinion, let's put the temporary ones on your street. Those don't cost anywhere near as doing the cost of the actual repairs. And then put those up on the street and then see, all right, those are in for 6 months. What does everybody think of those for a while? I think we need to maybe get a couple more sets of those and dig into that list. And then you might find out a lot of people say, I don't even want these. These things are a pain in the caboose, you know?
That is the benefit to the temporary speed hump. I believe there was an order at one point about buying more temporary speed humps. But then with what money? Okay.
Well, we'll give you the
and-
money. Those aren't that expensive.
But then also too, I haven't ever been able to. It's sort of like it was like a DPW thing, and so I didn't know. And I know I'm from the DPW department, but again, keep in mind, working from home, doing just engineering projects. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to go track it down. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll have to make a determination.
Counselor?
Sorry.
Counselor Ocasio has a question, if we're waiting for you.
Oh, I actually had
Oh, I'm
one.
sorry.
I'm sorry, Patty. Just in the final thing, and if anybody wants to talk about temporary speed humps, that'd be great. My final one was internal requests. Some of the things that counselors do relative to roads, including yours truly, is I try to rely, especially on the small stuff, to the internal team, the highway department of the DPW, stuff that's not contracted, you know, the potholes, for example, okay, I'm constantly asked for money from the DPW, and I use this one as an example to show my complete and total lack of influence around here, right? Is I had 2.5 years ago filed an order so that a small little berm like that, much pavement, if the highway department of the DPW could go out on a section of Sargent Street where the flow of the water is coming off of Locust across the street and running on the sidewalks and in the garage of these 2 people's homes. I asked if you could, it probably could be solved in 1 hour to send 2 guys up, put a little 1-inch lip on to keep the street runoff onto Sargent Street.
Excuse me.
So it's not freezing over in the winter. It isn't causing damage to these people's. It's not blowing out the tree belt. 2.5 years I have asked the DPW to put a 1-inch berm in front of these residents' driveway. and it has been unable to be done. And Lord only knows, I'd like to know what does that list look like, and who's managing that list, because either there's a list 400 pages long, but we're into the year. So I'm just wondering, what decade will it be done at some point? Because this would take literally an hour for people to do. So this is like these little in-house projects. We need to also see how we're managing those and get some priority scale, and then bang out the fast wins, because like residents are saying, it's such a customer service killer, right? People are saying, I'm paying all these damn taxes, and I got this city freaking water running all over my driveway. That's right on my, and then you guys are going to hand me a ticket because I don't keep my sidewalk clear. And it's so demoralizing to residents. And they're like, I call my counselors, nobody does it, 2.5 years. And I'm like, I'll get calls. We're working on it, Kev. We're there. You're on the list. I got one, by the way, from, won't be named here at the meeting, but back at March. And just to give a context, we're trying to get the potholes fixed for the parade. And the shamrocks are down and the potholes are filled, but you're next week. I haven't said anything more about it, but we're in June. That was 3 months ago. So and that next week is now 12 weeks. So anyways, I'll stop there, but thank you for coming tonight.
And I should have been writing this down. Counselor Sullivan, then Counselor Ocasio.
Could
and
I
then
just
Counselor-
comment on that?
and-
Only because.
And absolutely.
So there is a 400-page list, and I'm not joking in the extent that, and we just came through the public hearing on the budget. So, and the team does do a great job in trying to prioritize and get to those projects that impact public safety first. And there is a budget thing. We have a total of, and this is outside of the limits and that, of $75,000 to make those things happen. And I noted at the public hearing that we could spend that in a month and still not get to the list. But please feel free to reach out. If you go through the DPW website, or even call the director, through Mike Gallagher, I'll give him a lot of credit. He maintains a clear list.
Talk to Mike tomorrow. He's the guy
He's in
since you
Ireland
used
right now.
his name.
Okay,
All right. Yeah.
And he does make decisions. And again, we need to address, and we are, through the reorganization, through the structural reorganization of DPW, a better communication so that decisions do get elevated up as opposed to staying at that level. That being said, I give that crew a whole lot of credit in using those limited funds and prioritizing based on, again, public safety. There's a lot of great things we'd love to do, but it's July starting. With $75,000, or even if you're in March, you've got 3, 4, 5, in this case, 11, 12 months ahead of us. If we spend that money too quickly, we don't have any more left.
If I may, Patty, just real quick.
Yeah,
On that point, though, is we're already paying the salaries. What does it cost on the $75,000? Is it $10 to have a little 1-inch berm of pavement that goes across these people's driveway? It's a $20 expense.
And again, I know it's important to you, just like every other call that comes in is important to the person calling it in. And so again, they've been doing a really good job. So there is a communications challenge that through this new reorganization that we're going to begin developing, that will keep those projects up there and probably get more attention by other people. So I don't know that the previous director knew about that. I know that this director didn't know about that. And again, back to culture, back to what's been happening for decades. But I want to end with saying they do their best.
Counselor Sullivan, then Counselor Ocasio, then Counselor McGrath-Smith.
Yeah. So mine's more of a comment. This isn't a question for sure. Speeding, right? We've now made speeding a DPW problem. We're trying to cure speeding with pavement. It's an enforcement problem, not a paving problem. Speed humps cause other problems as well. All right? Our trash trucks, our fire trucks, they're all double axle vehicles. They're all double axle vehicles. So this is contributing to maintenance problems, snow removal, snow plows when a snow plow hits a speed bump. All right? All of these factors and the money that we spend, I believe, correct me, $60,000 roughly per speed bump for a code enforcement problem. All right? That's all I've got to say about it. I would be in favor of a complete moratorium on speed bumps altogether and start putting this problem back where it belongs.
I think there's the sort of
Right, I'm
combination approach that I think is happening with, it is together. It is both enforcement and it has implications on maintenance and safety. You know, putting in speed humps where they're not warranted could cause very unsafe conditions from a safety perspective as well. So it's multiple, you know, multiple departments that need to work together.
Councilor Ocasio.
Okay, I have two things. Y'all talking about the rubber speed humps, right? There's a whole row, I think it's Berkshire Street by Main Street off the highway, by the highway, where Sunoco gas station used to be at, that street going up that way. So right, so they had a rubber speed bump there before for, it's been now going on 3 years because I just started city council. So they put it in order because they told me that they had a rubber speed bump there. They took it out, DPW took it out and said that they was gonna replace it with the real McCoy, right? And 3 years later, they're still waiting for it, you know? And I go through there just to check out the traffic, you know, and a lot of people, it's like a hidden street, but people do go through there and they do speed, and there are children on that road. And a few times when cars go up the road and they take that sharp turn, they wind up on the first house lawn, front lawn. Okay, so the people there already, they're scared to even live there because of that. So I have put it in order when I first started. You know, I've been now city council for 1.5 years, and because that rubber one was removed, but the real one was never put there, and it is very dangerous, one. Two, on South Summer Street, I advocated for the parking cars lines to be put in, okay, like Terry Murphy came through, Will came through, Nelson came through, Will came through. I advocated for those lines to be put in. Finally, my dream came true, and all the residents in that block, the lines were put up, but guess what? That was like probably 6-7 months ago, and now you go there and the lines are gone. Like, there's no sign of the lines. So I don't know what kind of material they're using, but the lines are gone. Like, you don't have them anymore, they disappeared. So I don't know what's happening. So either they're using cheap material, maybe they just to, you know, so Carmel will stop being a bug up the Yan Yan, you know, because I advocate so much for those lines because we do need them, because we're fighting for parking, and without those lines, you know, we fight, constantly fighting, neighbors are arguing with each other because of the parking. So finally, I get the lines put in, but then and again, get them put in, and they cut 5 parkings because now they use put the emergency lines, right? Instead of putting it like small for one vehicle to fit, you know, emergency lane, they took 2 parkings on one side, 3 in the other, so now we show up 5. So now that's another problem. And now we don't have no lines at all, because from night to day, it's like I woke up and I was like, whoa. And then the lines were too big, like too wide, like a car and half a car can fit in that space. So it wasn't measured correctly to the way I see it. You know, the way the cars were parking, there was so many spaces that you can just use those two spaces and make another spot for another car. You know, I give Mike credit in DPW because, I mean, he hears my mouth. He don't hear my mouth. I'm always talking to him. I call him up. I go in person. And he do, you know, address things that when I go there and I ask for it, because I also pick up handicap signs from the street that people are tired of seeing all of these handicap unnecessary signs. So people in the neighborhood are taking upon themselves, right, to unscrew them, the whole pole with the sign, and just throw it in the middle of the road. You know, so I'm advocating for that. There's too many handicap signs being put up also. People are dead. They don't no longer live there. People are not using it. And it's taking up space. So people, like I said, are doing, you know, what people will get frustrated and do. Unscrew it, you know, because it's only screws, and just throw it around, and kids are swinging it all over the neighborhood and breaking people's cars, or you know, scratching something or breaking a window with it. And so it's become a big problem in South Holyoke, and I know, you know, in Springdale Park also, in that section, you know. And I address it all the time, and I mean, I don't know what else to do, you know. But my lines do need to be put back up, you know. I mean, give me the measurement, give me the little thing, and I'll be more than happy to volunteer my time and do it myself, but you guys gotta use the right material, because like I said, they were there and now they're not. And nobody went and paved the street, you know, so the lines can disappear. So I'm just curious.
Mary?
I'll follow up on that.
Okay. Councilor McGrath Smith.
Really quickly, looking in the list, we can see that there's a weighted RSR of 26 to 47, and then there's one big jump to 58.5. So just wondering why the Locust Street was chosen. Thank you.
Is this on the presentation part?
Where are you looking at?
I thought that it might be related to
Okay,
construction
thanks.
work that was being done or part of some other project that was being folded in. I just wasn't sure why that road, because there were other roads that had worse RSR than that road, and it was a big jump to that one.
Okay. Looking at it, so from the, how much does each street fit in a particular cost or whatever? My guess is that while there is that jump, and you see it here on the master, like on the list that went with the memo,
Yeah.
with the focus on wards 1 and 2, or on 1 and 4, that was the first one that eventually was in 4. So it's almost like, yes, I mean, let me be very honest in that things that are less than 60, they're all bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I had another community that we would not allow the pavement program to, we would have them set that low limit as 40, because there was a debate that unless it was like Jordan was saying, where there's truly no pavement, you don't really have a 15 pavement. I mean, that's like practically no pavement, right? The program doesn't really has that other limit, right? So it's like they're all still very, very bad. And when I'm looking at the other list that's in the memo from that other piece, otherwise, there was,
I
Essex.
thought maybe because Ward 4 had the lowest average RSR, if it was trying to get the average for the ward higher.
Yes. So like, because there was a focus to try to pick streets from 1 and 4. Like, the reality is, I don't even think there's enough money, like you said, in a certain year. Certainly, you wouldn't have to actually pave it in 2 separate years, but you'd have to use 2 years' money, right, to do a street.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's really, could you really even pick one each ward every time, and then there's like a winner for, you know what I mean? I don't know that that's feasible. So yeah, that's why on this presentation you'll see a skip, but if you look at the master list, that's the next Ward 4 one.
And my last question is just for a road like Bemis, I don't see a path forward. I don't know how we ever pave Bemis. If it's over $700,000 to pave it, and that's one whole year's worth of paving, are we really going to do that?
Where did you say that was? The seven?
Bemis,
Bemis, okay, yeah.
between Northampton Street and 141, and it's a well-traveled road.
Yep.
But also a local road. And so when does it ever get paved? What is the path forward for them? Do they need a different plan? Do they fall underneath any of these other programs that we could potentially use? Because I don't think so, based on how it's coded as a local road, even though it is well-traveled in our city. So then do we have to come up with a plan where we are bonding for a road like that has fallen into such disrepair and is very long and doesn't fall underneath anything? Let me look.
That's where I think a lot of times, and in many places, where the decisions come from is not coming from a bad place to do the 1.5 inch. It was to get more streets done. You know what I mean? It wasn't appropriate. That's why at some point the decision is made to do something. It's unfortunate because it's very short-sighted. It's trying to take care of that emergency problem now, and you see it now and whatever, and it's like avoiding and postponing the idea that the longer you wait, if someone were to eventually say, I have to bond and take care of it, now it's worse than it was if it was maybe addressed in the beginning.
Bemis is 52. It is. And also, it was because, again, and it's not for better or worse, right? Because it was on the paving list last year, it was hacked apart in order to put in the water and gas lines, or gas lines. And so that's great because now you have new gas service. But also, now there's an entire disruption down sections of the road. So I do wonder what the path forward is for a road like that, and whether the engineering department or DPW wants to come forward with that proposal, or if
I'm hoping too that like the maybe the geotech assessment could also help in some of those more costly roads, because ideally the 4-inch mill and overlay is me overreacting to very deep cracks. You know what I mean? Maybe they would come up with something and they'd say, we've looked at the base material and we've confirmed for sure, and we think you're okay with like a lesser treatment.
like 3-inch, or maybe geotech comes back.
Yeah. A what?
Like maybe geotech comes back and says, actually, we think a 3-inch might
They could confirm and
suffice.
refine some of the things. I think probably overall you're still looking at the cost. And then ultimately, I think it's, other than sort of giving you the data, that's sort of where presenting it is coming. Like, it would, if you wanted to bond, you could bond. It could be, you know what I mean? I could try to tell you what other communities spend on roads and what their things are to give you more data, but I think the reality is some additional money would need to be spent.
Counselor Bacon and then Mayor Garcia.
Thank you. So I want to make a comment on the macro issue, which I think we will end up needing to approach similar to the way we approach the trees. And we're going to have to come up with the top tier to try to do something to move that needle from the 71. And it's going to involve the rating, which I think this is a great presentation that you've done. And I really appreciate all the work you've put into pulling this together, because I know it was a lot of data that's not organized at all, that you're trying to put out there for us. So this is, I think, a great base to start from, and it at least gives us a measurement system to use. But I think you've got Bemis, I've got Homestead. I have all of Blueberry Hill that was on a published list in 2024 you're all going to get your streets done. And trust me, there is not one person up there that does not remember that. So the other thing we need to do on the micro level, which is like today, tomorrow, for those of us who are the ward counselors, and I put through every single thing people ask for, but I let them know, don't hold your breath on this, because there's a really long list and there's a whole bunch of different priorities. But nonetheless, people still get frustrated. So I think this list that you put out tonight, if this ends up being the final list, maybe if it's not too much extra work, if you could just give us sort of an explanation that we can give to the people, like, you were on the list in 24 and 25, but due to blah, 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 this became the list in 2026. And then I think in the meantime, we've got to see if we have the resources to try to make a difference in this, because we have a lot of bonding coming up for the city too. The school, we've got this River Terrace. I mean, we got a lot of liabilities coming on for the city too. But that would be, I think, what we need to do, because we all know beyond this list, we could all name probably 5 streets that are like, oh my, I mean, we know it, right? So, but we won't solve it today, but a 2-part thing, because we do have to get back to communicating to the people, because all that other stuff got published, and I think it was jumping the gun, because like you say, what the list is this year could change next year depending what happens.
Yep.
Something that's top tier becomes not even on the list. So that's a valid point, yeah.
Well, and I guess there's a part where, especially me coming in, not necessarily finding everything from past immediately, this is almost like fresh eyes. Any
Right.
street that's not on the list, it's not like the intent was that someone looked and never mind, that's not on it anymore.
right.
You see what I'm saying? It was like, here's the
Right.
new list, and then that's based on what the current data, and
Yeah.
then that street just isn't on it.
Understood,
You know?
understood. We just need to explain it person to person.
Mayor Garcia, and then we probably want to, we've got a lot of things to
Yep.
talk about tonight, so maybe we can.
Thank you.
Okay. And by the way, it was a wonderful presentation. I'm glad you both were here.
Oh, thank you.
It's very good, thank you.
Some good news. Holyoke's not unique. We got road issues all across the Commonwealth, and every mayor's meeting I go to, Chapter 90 and advocating for more in that formula at the Commonwealth level is on the forefront all the time. Councilor Bacon is absolutely correct. If we're talking about a path forward for roads, I don't want us to get into the habit of let's, strong advocate for this road, let's do that road, when there's 5 and 1 and 2. It's all across the city. So we have to be very strategic in our approach and make sure that we're tackling it in an equitable way. The other thing too is we are starting, once we're finally done with this budget process, we do have that grant, TJ Plant's working on the capital improvement plan. We'll incorporate the roads, and I love the idea somehow on the website to the counselors, educating the public a little better about how this works. Maybe even organizing, and I know some people sometimes don't like, we can do a public meeting, let people air it out. We can share this presentation, and it'll be a great opportunity to be transparent in our process, maybe even help us move the needle a little better and come up with more creative ways to come up with those funding solutions and determine what that number is, put these resources together so that we can start chipping away at minimum, so that we're not in this ongoing downward trajectory that we're currently in. So we can do that.
Does anybody have anything else? I'm wondering what you want to do. Is this complied with? Do we
I
wanna
think so.
Table?
I think we had a really good discussion, and there's some nice follow-up items from everyone, and I'll make sure to get you my order on Sargent Street. And motion that it's been complied with. Thank you for
All those
filing
in
the order.
favor?
Good item.
Aye, second.
Aye, so moved. Thank you very much.
Very nice,
Very
thank you.
much.
Are they staying for number 5 too?
The hoisting
Oh,
operator
it's-
to
that's
fuel.
DPW, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Victoria. Appreciate it.
Victoria.
Where are you going? No, she's not. She's leaving.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you.
Bye, Meg. I'll talk to you later. Thanks, Victoria. All right, so we're going to take up item number 5. Order that there be and hereby appropriated by transfer in the fiscal year 2025, $24,000 as follows from hoisting operator to fuel depot, $24,000. Go ahead, Mary, or who's ever.
Brief explanation, it's attached to the order, but evidently there was a spill at the fuel depot that went back several years ago. It got back on Mass DEP's radar, and so they're requesting that we do this assessment at the fueling station. So we went out and solicited quotes, and the lowest quote from a competent firm came in at the 24,000, and so that's the request for transfer.
Okay. Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah, thanks. Mary, how many other people responded to the?
I think we had at least 3 others, if not 4 others.
Okay, because I'm looking at the RFP or RFQ, and it states in the RFQ 24,000, and they came in at exactly 24.
No, the RFQ, I think you're looking at their submission that says 24,000. The RFQ is absent. There wasn't an RFQ, it was a request for quotes, in the sense that there wasn't anything super formal, and we had, like I said, 3 or 4 others that came in, and GZA came in the lowest at the 24.
GZA is also the one that did the work at Scotts Tower.
I don't know that. They're an environmental assessment firm. That's their specialty.
Yeah, yeah. No, we've also run into them down at the bottom of Appleton Street, and I'm 99% sure they're the designers of the work where we're having trouble up at Scotts Tower as well.
So they're not designers on this. They're environmental scientists. They're doing assessments. They're soil testing, collecting that kind of data. This isn't a design.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay, those were my only 2 question comments.
Okay.
I had a question.
Counselor Jordan?
When did the spill occur? And what was the extent of what actually happened?
We have no idea. This came from Mass DEP. Again, we have several active spills out there. This isn't the only one that the city has. And so there should have been an ongoing schedule of providing updates to Mass DEP with respect to the conditions at the site. And evidently this was one that hadn't happened. And so you see in your package, there's the request from Mass DEP for this information.
I can help here. The spill happened in 1998.
Okay? So probably until we clean it,
Yeah,
we're going to be having to provide updates on the contaminants still remaining in the soils.
yeah. Hoyoke Gas and Electric is under the same problem right now with Mass DEP trying to get closure to some of these that have been going on for over 25 years. So it was I just glanced at it, but it was a small 2,000-gallon tank that leaked. This much I can tell you, given the location of that station, anything that leaked 25 years ago is long gone, but we still have to go through this process.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, this is interesting. I actually saw this paragraph. Sounds like it's 1988.
88.
actually.
Could be that far, yes.
Yeah, 1988. It sounds like there was a release from the now removed 2,000-gallon gasoline tank that used to be there before
Correct.
the fuel depot went in 10 years later. Because that's before my tenure even. But I remember when we put the fuel depot in, and by the way, since we're on so we obviously, every so many years, we have to do periodic testing to see if things are affecting groundwater or whatever. That must be what this is.
It would be making sure the contaminant spill hasn't traveled.
Right, staying contained.
It's correct.
Wow. Just goes to show you the tentacles, huh? 1988, and we're still evaluating. Question, since we're on the topic of central fueling facility, my mind playing tricks on me, but wasn't there a proposal or there was some talk about we needed to do some major improvements at that
We need to do
facility? And
major-
wasn't there some a proposal that almost got to the altar and then it kind of went away and we never saw that? Like, what ended up happening with that?
So we currently have, it's underway right now. We have another firm, Weston and Sampson, is doing an assessment at the fuel depot to look at how do we replace everything, if that's the option we need to go down based on the conditions, and the conditions there aren't good.
Right.
And then
that was what we
do we
were hearing.
replace it in kind to become that full service fuel depot that we have right now?
Yep.
Do we do a partial replacement, which might retail some of the gasoline services? And when I say retail, that doesn't mean pulling up to a gas station and paying the same rate that that customer does. It would be a bid process, but we wouldn't be maintaining as large of a facility. A third option, but this seems totally off the table, is to just get out of the business of providing fuel. But we have fire trucks, we have the trash trucks, and so having a place for them to go for that diesel we couldn't do that. So we're currently dealing with some issues with the integrity of the tanks right now. They haven't developed into a leak where Mass DEP is concerned, but there's some work that needs to occur in order for that not to happen. The record keeping at the fuel depot with respect to who's using it, how much they're using, is problematic. The software is about 20 years old. It's not working right, so it's a struggle on a monthly basis to identify the usage, and we kind of get general usage by department, not by individual vehicle. So there's some significant challenges there, and we're in the process of assessing what our options might be and what the cost of each of those options are.
Feel free to bring the council in when you're prepared to have an informed decision about this, and we should go back into some of the studies that we did in the 90s that generated the decision to have our own fuel depot in this manner like this. For example, one of the big drivers was by us getting the gas and the fuel wholesale, it was by far the best price. Because for some time post that leak, they started doing it and buying it retail with these, we put it out to bid contracts, and that turned out to be was way more expensive, and that's what drove us into the investment to have the fuel depot. The other thing that also helped us in that decision was we avoid the auto excise taxes by doing it ourselves wholesale, because we're exempt from the excise tax.
And we would be too in a retail. The relationship, the billing would be specific to recognizing it's going to a municipal operation.
All right. So when you're ready to have that, that's an interesting conversation to go forward. But obviously, relative to this proposal, I'll certainly support to approve it, because you have to do this study.
I'll second that. All those in favor? Aye. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not sure, Mary, if you still need to be here or not, but I'll read the next order. Order that the amount of $1,500,000 in appropriate for the purpose of financing the demolition, remodeling, reconstruction, engineering, construction, equipping or re-equipping of various municipal facilities and purchase of municipal vehicles, including the payment of costs incidental or related thereto. To meet this appropriation, the treasurer, who is here tonight, with the approval of the mayor, is authorized to borrow said amount under the and pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 7, and any other enabling authority. And I also wanted to mention that City Council President Tessa Murphy Ramboletti has joined us as well on Zoom. So, who wants to? The mayor.
That is me.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Madam President, councilors. What we have in
front of you, it's a authorization to bond for $1.5 million. I don't know if in your packet there was a list of items at all.
There's a June
Included.
10th email from
An email?
you.
Yep. So, and you know, just to understand the strategy, and this is all contingent upon, and I know we're going to have a conversation shortly on certification of free cash. These are immediate things that we can get into motion now. It's my expectation that I want to spend as little as possible to almost nothing of that bond authorization. Like, for example, to stay in that annual purchases of 3 cruisers, and then you'll see the 2025, you know, the DPW large capital purchase. You know, these orders, you put them in, and it takes like a year before they finally come in. So it's so that we can go forward and start and put the order in, and later when these vehicles and these large, you know, capital become available, we can then use alternative revenue sources to pay. But the authorization is so that we can get moving. Then you also have the HVAC system upgrade at the Holyoke Police Department, new radio tower installation at the Soldiers Home per the fire department request. With the new Soldiers Home, we have a radio tower in the old Soldiers Home, so they're going to move it. But since they're moving it, they're going to upgrade it and do some work, and so there's a cost there. And then there's remediation work or roof work at the headquarters of the fire department, and then they have a leak that's happening over there, and then there's remediation work to stop flooding at Station 3 at the Holyoke Fire Department. There's DPW and other folks are still looking into anticipated costs for those, but this list here is just what I asked these departments to give me. Bring forward to me immediate things that we need to start working on now, so I can encompass it within this bond authorization, but also understand that it's my intent to, you know, this is so that we can get started, but it is my intent to later find alternative revenue sources and not tap into this to, you know, cover the costs. Any questions at all, or ideas?
Mayor, I have a
This is my
question.
my first stab at trying to bring these to your attention, but also, you know, with a strategy, but also if you have other ideas, I welcome them for sure.
I just have a question on the new radio tower
Yeah.
at the Soldiers Home. That's not state paid for at all?
Doesn't seem like it. And I know the fire chief's not on. He could.
And the Veterans Administration Department in the state, couldn't it help us with that, maybe? Lori, I don't know. Just a thought.
It's our equipment. I think that's
Oh,
what it is.
okay.
It's our equipment, and the issue is that once that Soldiers Home, I think this has come up before. That's the reason I know about it is the Soldiers Home. If you see it rising,
Yeah.
pretty much anywhere in the city now, it's the highest point. It's in the region, so they're going to need to put. They had equipment there. Now they're going to need to reinstall new equipment. I do think that there's going to be some partnership, maybe some electrical work or whatnot from the Soldiers Home, but as far as the equipment itself, it's important. We own it, it's ours, we have to pay for it. And to the mayor's point, there could be grants that allow for this. So in that language that we received working with bond counsel, you know, it allows for the spending, it allows for the projects to move forward even if we're not going to be invoiced on them, while we go after state grants and other funding sources that may not come in until the fall or, you know, at some later point during the fiscal year.
Thank you. Mary, just a quick, I thought we already had a infrared asphalt reclaimer.
So we currently have one that's 30 years old and one that's probably about 15 or 20, but they both require CDL drivers. So the 30-year-old one isn't working well. This one we'd be able to use more often because it's small enough that it wouldn't require the CDL, and it's using a different fuel source. I can't remember if it's using propane as opposed to what the other one's using.
Yeah, this would be diesel fired, yeah.
Okay, so
Okay.
this we'd actually use.
Right.
Okay.
Patty left, so I guess I'll take over as vice chair until she's back. The Soldiers' Home has still got 2 or 3 more years until it's completed. So I don't know how quote unquote urgent that is. Obviously, we'll have to have it switched over before they demo the old building. Hopefully you'll have certainly well more than a year from now, or I would say before that would actually have to be done.
Absolutely.
If it's even eligible. So I don't know if that one,
I think some of
Is
some of
do or
those,
die
I
at
think
the
with some of those, you're absolutely correct as far as that. I think with some of these projects, even when we talk about the roof at the fire station, right?
Right.
It's, I mean, the roof at the fire station might cost $500,000.
Sure.
But to get the study, the engineering work,
Right.
those initial steps done, same thing with installing this equipment. You know, it costs money to bring out the engineers that'll tell us exactly what the bid package should be.
Right.
And that's to get the ball rolling, as the mayor was saying, with these projects.
And I'm hoping that he'll jump on if he got my text, but the chief can tell you more in detail, Counselor. Anticipated target dates, conversations he's had probably with the contract construction folks, you know what I mean, as far as
Sure.
urgency.
yeah, right.
He's got all that information.
Okay. HVAC upgrade. Yeah, I mean, I guess some of the ones that I tend to be more warm to bonding for like building infrastructure. Like you've got a lot of those in here. Like the tower would definitely be in that genre. Roofs for the fire station. Whatever this flooding thing is at Station 3. HVAC upgrade for HPD. Other than like fire trucks, which are like $1 million each, you know, the real big ones, I tend to like to expense vehicles, you know, like cruisers and the other stuff. Is it possible that we could do something? Do we have a little bit in capital stabilization at this point, or could we get? Yeah, it's
very
not-
little. But
very little.
Remember, Counselor, like the 3 cruisers, for example.
Yes,
The order goes in, we won't get them till next year.
Right.
And that's when we pay for it.
exactly.
And so,
That's
hopefully by Friday, free cash is certified. We'll move the funds into capital. Now we got a funding source we can tap into. The less we can borrow, the better. Like,
Right.
That's been my thing.
Yeah, I think this was, to be perfectly honest, this came from advice from the state and our outside auditors. Because in order for some of these projects to start, even if, you know, free cash certified, it gets transferred into a stabilization fund, just to, like the mayor said, that's the way it will be. If we need to put a purchase order in place for those 3 cars by July 15th. I'm pulled that
Right,
date
right,
out of
right.
thin air, so
But
don't
I see
quote
what
me on it.
I understand.
It would
your point.
allow for us, the goal here is to never borrow, not even short term,
Mm-hmm.
a dime related to these projects, because they would all be paid for either from capital reserves, a direct free cash transfer, or through some other source, maybe an earmark from the state, you know, some other place. But this would at least allow for the balls to start rolling. And to be perfectly honest, the 1.5, you know, there's a list there that has dollar amounts attached to it. It's really just to allow for these things to happen. The goal would never be to borrow at all. We have the ability, we have the cash on hand to be able to spend. This would just allow for those things to happen during the council's summer recess. Because quite honestly, we'll have this conversation after this item, but we all know we shouldn't even be talking about some of these things in June. Some of these things, it should be during the course of the year, these things come up and you pay as you go. This would allow for that to happen.
So when, the only thing again, this is just housekeeping here, but important. Once the council makes the 1.5 authorization and you find the other source, I don't want to leave like a open ticket.
That's right.
For $1.5 million. So
Right.
I guess what I would be thinking is if you have free cash, I mean, we're not going to do nothing with this until Monday. Hopefully you'll know by Monday, right? But what you could also consider is if we want to go with stabilization as your source until you get the free cash certified, if you need to have this
I'll
all
take
go in.
stabilization, sure. I mean, obviously, the thing is with stabilization, the less to almost never we can tap into that, the better. And if we do, as long as we put the money back, right?
Right.
And look, I'm not.
Can-
If that's another path, and
I see what you're saying. So you don't want to have show that a use of it.
Yeah.
So then what, if this is being drafted and you only need this until free cash is certified, make sure you put an expiration provision
Yeah,
in
what
it
I'll-
so that once you get your free cash and you use that money for these things, I mean, some of this is totally legit to be bonded, like the roof at the fire
Can I
stations. And
stop you there? Because
Yeah, sure.
the fire chief is here.
yeah, the fire chief's on.
So if you want to talk about
well,
that.
I'm really not talking about the merits or demerits of the program.
No.
I know,
because-
but we
If
got
if I could just quickly to your point and stabilization, because I think we're all talking the same thing, but I just want to
Yeah.
be clear on something. We have cash on hand outside of stabilization. We don't need to touch our stabilization. We don't need to take money. We don't need to do a transfer from that. We have
Okay.
cash on hand now to
Order these
to
vehicles.
order these vehicles. Even if we had to pay for them next week, we have
Okay.
cash on hand now.
Beautiful.
The issue is this: we don't have the authorization to spend that
That's
money.
where the issue is.
That's what this is. All this is doing is authorizing the spending. It comes in the form of a debt authorization.
It's in the general fund though.
But it's in the general fund, but you have to have an appropriation of some sort.
So that's a supplemental appropriation.
Or
from the mayor.
it would have to be from free cash, or it would have to be, it can't be a supplemental because it wasn't part of, this is cash on hand that would become part of free cash once it's certified. So my point is that we have the money, we can put a timeline, more than appropriate. In fact, most authorizations already come with like a sunset clause kind of built in. Once you pass it, it's not like 20 years later that authorization is still lingering out there. We can spend that money. So we can, if it would make the council feel comfortable, we could certainly file new language that had a specific end date by the end of fiscal, 26, for example. The other thing I would point out is all of our language, all of our bond authorizations now have the clause, it's unique to Holyoke, that says the bonds can only be spent for the things they were initially appropriated for.
So you'll have to spell that out.
And
in
well,
there.
that list that you have there gets attached to it, right? We would, rather than have to do individual orders for each one of those specific things, we were able to write the language broad enough to encompass all of that. But I can tell you this, we've actually had to show the bond council meeting minutes and recordings from meetings to go back and say, when they were here, they were talking about this specific aspect of the project. And then we could go spend that. So we can certainly put those protections in for you. This is kind of a unique situation that we're in, and we're just trying to, make sure we can get these things up and running. Some of this could be done, it could be done on Monday. It could be done at the August meeting. It could be done, in the fall. So, but as far as this order is concerned,
that was my question.
yeah, if
What's
we
our
would need
table
to, we would need to have this authorization passed on
First.
Monday,
Okay.
so that we could. That was the hope, so that we could start getting those contracts in place. And the cruisers are probably the largest, is the biggest driver right now as far as timing. But some of these other things that we're trying to get done, the engineering reports for the foundation at Station 3 because it is flooding and there's a concern about, is it because of the trucks coming down, breaking up the foundation and waters, major water infiltration? That's going to require an engineering study, the roofs, other things. These are all projects that we'd like to start now, and these are what the departments have asked for.
So our responsibility tonight, if I hear you right, for the Finance Committee, is that we would make a motion to vote for this and send it forward.
Yes.
Counselor,
Who's saying?
that was me.
Oh,
Before you do that vote, though, because I did pull the chief from whatever he was doing, if he can talk about the radio tower situation.
okay. Chief? Thank you, go ahead.
It's not a radio tower. What it is the soldiers' home. As it's getting torn down, we have to move our infrastructure out of the soldiers' home because that's our main hub, and it has to get moved to the new soldiers' home. At that point, upgrading everything, it's got to be redone. So basically what this is Soldiers Home is the main hub for our communication network. And as soon as the Soldiers Home starts getting demoed, which is going to start happening within the next year, we're not going to have any infrastructure. So we're going to lose our communications out of there.
It's not gonna get
So that's
demoed
what
next
this
year.
is to go with the
Opening
Soldiers
a new
Home
facility on
project.
28.
Okay. All right,
I think it's longer than a year, Chief, that the current building's gonna be demoed.
Yes, Counselor, but everything's got to be out of it. And I think they were talking about like April of 26, but they want to start because what's going to happen is they're not going to have anything going on in there. It all has to be moved to the new building when the new building starts coming up. And I think they were talking about April of 26. And they need
Okay.
to start moving it because it's going to be a lengthy project.
All right, so what you're saying is that they're gonna let you go on the roof of the new building in April of 2026?
It needs to be in place by April of 2026.
Okay.
so if there's no more questions, or do I hear a motion?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see the bond language on it. I mean, we can move it forward to,
Pending.
I
bond
guess
language.
it's some of these we don't know what they're gonna cost, but I'm assuming, if they word it the right way and it's gonna be 1 year authorization and,
Is that what, because we can certainly file new language, we would need to get that. I can turn it around really quickly with bond counsel, like we have before, Counselor Jordan.
Yeah.
It's very common for us to introduce language specific to what the council's looking for the night of the meeting, just so long as what you actually vote on is the appropriate language.
and like I said, I have no problem actually keeping it as
Yeah.
bonding, if that helps you from a cash flow perspective.
Yeah.
Things that are roofs, building repairs, the tower for the fire department, like those are things that I think are reasonable to bond. You don't take debt if we don't have to, but understood that if those are long-term capital, to me, it's the ones like to bond for police cars, DPW vehicles.
Yeah.
Like that's the stuff that we should
don't
be
wanna-
expensing. Yeah.
So you're going on recess, you're coming back, you've got a meeting in August, September, maybe September, October. We'll get a
Understood.
transfer request. And so we're talking about putting in an order at that time versus putting the order right now.
Gotcha.
So that, and you're absolutely right. Like, we don't have to bond for, it's just there it's the authorization so we can
Okay.
move forward with the order
Yep.
versus actually spending it on July 1. That's not going to happen.
So we're going to authorize what was the wording again? The
It's whatever
motion
the
would be
language is.
to,
Well, we would have to approve the bond for 1.5, but they're going to put the provisions that it's just for these items and it's going to expire in 1 year because they're going to find these alternate
right, but what's
funding
our
sources.
motion?
Motion is just to approve.
Okay, all right,
And it'll be subject to the language they give us by Monday.
okay. And there's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And one more item, I believe. Mary, I need to ask you something, if you don't mind. Can you,
You want me to take over?
would you? I
Yeah.
just got a text from somebody that has a question.
Yep, no problem. So the next item is item number 7, and for that matter, we could suspend the rules to take 7 and 8 as a package because they're kind of related. Item number 7 is an order introduced by myself and Councilor Vacan, which says that the treasurer and auditor provide the city council with an update and timeline on the certification of free cash. And then item 8 is ordered also from Jordan Vacan that the treasurer, auditor, mayor, please come to the finance to discuss why Schedule A year-end reconciliation for fiscal '24 hasn't been filed yet. This, by the way, was filed 3.5 months ago. Failure to meet this end of the year filing timely potentially jeopardizes our state aid payments, cash flow, and the certification of our free cash. The filing was due on November 30th, and
Thank you.
as of March 4th was still unfiled. It should be noted that it was filed many months late last year and appears to be late again. Let's please discuss so that we can get this back on track together. And motion to take 7 and 8 off the table as a package.
So moved.
All in favor? So moved. So under discussion, obviously a lot's happened since March 4th, and we're down to the witching hour of coming up before June 30th. I know a couple weeks ago you gave us an update, Rory. What's the state of the state, and how do you see this playing out over the next week and where we're at?
Well, as I mentioned in my communication, I've, finished the piece that
Schedule A's in.
I never said Schedule A was in. I said the
Okay.
reconciliation. I know these words get thrown around kind of
So,
interchangeably.
please be really
I'll be very
precise with
specific.
us.
So,
Yeah, thank you.
So the way this all works is the treasurer, the auditor, the town city accountant, and the collector all have different roles that we play to file this paperwork. There's a balance sheet filing and there's a Schedule A filing. That's kind of your end-of-year reporting. The balance sheet is what gets you free cash. You can actually file your balance sheet, you can get free cash certified, and your Schedule A might be filed but not even fully approved until many, 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 many months later, even well after the fiscal year is done. So that's just kind of a very thumbnail sketch on the process, right? Mm-hmm. So where have the holdups been? The holdups have been in a few different areas, but I know the one that keeps coming up and has been talked about a lot has to do with reconciliation, cash receipts, so on and so forth. So as I said in my communication to the council, that the reconciliation work was done, it's been submitted, it was being reviewed. That's the status currently.
Reviewed by who? The state?
It's reviewed by our internal auditors. It's reviewed by our external auditors who, and this is unique to Holyoke, and I can understand the reasons why we've done this historically, but it is very unique. Most communities don't outsource the preparation of the balance sheet and the Schedule A. Most communities do that internally. So it's really just the treasurer and collector, depending on the structure, and the accountant matching their numbers. That's in its simplest form, that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
You get some reports from your financial advisors, statement of indebtedness. The auditor has to file a snow and ice report annually. I mean, so there's all these kind of things. Normally, it's done internally. In Holyoke, we contract that work out. So that's where things are right now. Once I'm told, upload everything, and there's a state portal where you upload these things. I mean, I'm sure you remember when you were council president, you had to sign off on some things in DLS Gateway. It's that same portal that for the tax rate setting, I believe.
Yep.
That's something that the council president is actually involved in. The clerk manages all the access. So that's where things are right now. If the state reviews things and can get back to us, it'll be certified before the end of the fiscal year. If that doesn't happen, if it doesn't get certified by the end of the fiscal year, that money doesn't go away, it doesn't disappear, it doesn't turn into a pumpkin. it'll just get added to the next year's free cash certification. So, for example, in '23, we know that the free cash that was certified was actually less than what it should have been. The state acknowledged that, we acknowledged that, we knew that. So carry that forward at 24, 24 gets certified, that money would get added in plus 24. If for some reason that doesn't happen, it would get added to the 25 certification. So that's the process, right? The money doesn't disappear, it doesn't turn into a pumpkin. It's still our money. We have access to it. We'll have access to
In
it
the
once it's
future.
certified. Exactly. Yep.
Counselor Bacon?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
So what are we waiting for between internal auditor, external auditor, and the submission? In that process, where are we held up at this point?
I'm waiting for the word to upload my documentation and click the radio button on
From the
electric-
external auditor?
Correct, yes.
And they don't have a list of questions that they've given to you that they need answers to?
I've answered all their questions to date, and I haven't been asked anything in over a week and a half.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, since I sent that communication to you,
Okay.
I haven't been asked anything. The only thing I have been asked is, as the internal audit team is doing some of their review, they've asked, oh, can you reformat this a little bit, or can you change this to make sure everything kind of ties up nice and neat? And, I'm responding to that, but that's not changing necessarily the underlying numbers.
All right, and so just to follow up, we had that rather odd transfer come in relative to the police department and the injured on duty.
Yeah.
It appeared to be some sort of a reconciliation adjustment to bring those accounts up to date and into line.
Yep.
So was that part of that
No.
closeout, or was
No,
that
that's
just
that's a completely separate
regular
thing.
cook?
I'll be perfectly
closeout?
honest with you. I did watch finance last night. I was
Yeah.
aware of that transfer.
Yeah.
I understand exactly what the chief was saying, and kind of that. I also, it raised my eyebrows as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things happening that lead to things like that, right? There's a lot of things that we're trying to improve as we're trying to improve these processes. For example, the way workers' comp is tracked and processed and paid. You guys noticed all those dollars in the budget this year, and you were like, why are there these $4 on every page? That's because what we realized through the work of the personnel office, Kelly Curran led that effort, and also the auditor's office were part of this, and certainly my office handling payroll, is that the regular injured on duty transfers were happening. Certain things weren't updated in the system. So what was happening is it was causing artificial deficits in one account, and other accounts where the money had been budgeted had never been spent, or money that should have been transferred. Very similar to the transfer that was discussed at a previous finance committee meeting, which had to do with the medical health and dental trust, where we actually had to take a vote to transfer it from one place to another. So sometimes those types of things come up.
But it didn't affect the
But
reconciliation.
it didn't affect the reconciliation. That's a fiscal 25 thing. We're talking about fiscal 24.
Okay.
What I will say is this. When I started this role as treasurer, we were 18 months behind on just about everything, right? That's what I inherited. And I had support, and, and it is what it is. But we have been trying to improve processes. So when fiscal 24 closes last June, because that's what we're talking about, July 1st, right? Because we're in fiscal 25 now. Cash receipts, the turning over of cash receipts, like the general day-to-day stuff, not the missing reconciliation work where we find things that departments hadn't turned over yet, we had made great strides on, right? We were as close to being up to date as possible with the way our system currently operates. We'll get to the point eventually when we fully utilize Munis. Fully utilize Munis. If you wanted to ask the auditor what's our cash position? Not the treasurer, the auditor. What's our position right now? They would be able to tell you with a couple of clicks, because it's not going to be when you look at a budget report, or the auditor even looks at a budget report and says, why is revenue so down in this area, right? You were bringing up parking revenue the other night. Well, through the reconciliation work, I found $30,000 worth of receipts that hadn't been handed over properly, having to do with parking, that were sitting in an account, right? There, we have the money, it's safe. We don't know what it is, but through this reconciliation work, we realize, oh, this is parking revenue. And then when the auditor is trying to do the tax recap to set the budget, you notice there was a drop-off. Well, we found why there was a drop-off, because she's basing it on what she had real at the time, right?
Okay.
We can say that on so many different fronts. That's just one small example that is top of mind. So back to the reconciliation. That work, when fiscal 24 started, cash receipts were good, but we were far behind on reconciliation. Like actually being able to get in there and find this, I hate to use the term missing money because it's not actually missing. It's unidentified what we should be applying.
It's in the
to.
cloud.
It's in the cloud. Yeah, there you go. It's safe. It's safe, but it's not been posted properly. It really wasn't until the fall, late fall, 4-5 months after the beginning of the fiscal year. So now we're into fiscal 25, where I was able to start doing that work, right? To be able to start looking back at fiscal 24. Now that leads us to where we are now, because why are we so late? Well, it's because that work should really be happening in the fiscal year. We were so far behind, try to make improvements, still behind, maybe a little bit better, but not where we want to be. So now we're a week before the end of the fiscal year. It's not 5 months later. I have my staff finally, I finally have a great core staff. Not to take away, but I've had a couple great core folks, but some of those other positions, I've had a lot of turnover, right? And so I would get somebody trained, they would start doing the work, and then they move on, right? I've got a great core staff now, I've got them trained. So now we're in fiscal 25, we're starting to get the reconciliations for 25 done. That's happening now. We've already pivoted, we didn't stop, right? So when you see me here working late and, you see other folks doing this work, that's what we're working on. We're working on saying, okay, because what I have in my mind is the voters, and I thank them for it, made the decision to professionalize the treasurer's office. I want whomever is appointed to that position, whether it be a combined treasurer collector or not, whatever it ends up being, right, that they're not inheriting the same kind of mess that I inherited, and quite honestly, the same kind of mess that previous treasurers, because this has been talked about, we could go back 20 years and some of these issues have existed. So that's why it's been so important for me to make sure that we're not making quick, very similar to the kind, it was really interesting listening to this road paving conversation and thinking about the treasurer's office. I know I've talked about the stain on the ceiling, and once you paint over it, and you try to figure out where the stain's coming from, and next thing you know, you've ripped your whole ceiling down, you got to patch up the roof, and it's very similar to the conversation we were just having about the road paving, right? You have to make moves to keep things, progressing, but sometimes in order to do that, it's quick, short-sighted moves without ever really taking a proactive approach, and that's what I've been trying to do. So, starting with fiscal 26, I've finally at the point where we've restructured our bank accounts. I know that's something we've talked a lot about, and that adds, quite honestly, when you have to deal with 60 bank accounts and money coming and going, I inherited departments that were signing up for their own credit card processing, not spending, but getting money coming in. Money's hitting bank accounts. I got no idea what it is. There's no rhyme or reason. It's just showing up. I reach out to departments, right? So what I've done is starting on July 1st, I've got a new bank account structure. I've got a new checking account structure. I'm not completely closing off the former accounts, but I'm drawing a deep line in the sand so that from fiscal 25 back, right, everything's kind of in a sandbox. Fiscal 26 forward, we're going to have clean, fresh accounts. We're going to have a new process where our checks get cleared on a daily basis in the system. Right now, we show 350,000 plus checks uncleared in our system. I have to produce a cleared check report for our outside auditors. It's impossible to do that with the way our system's currently designed. So I've already put the plan in place. That's going to change moving forward. Whomever's going
You
to
had
be.
gotten rid of a lot of the bank accounts a couple years ago.
I've been working on getting rid of them, but then this is the problem. If I could just focus on the proactive stuff like that and not have to deal with all being reactive and deal with everything else, I would have already had many of these things done. But when I have to split my time trying to catch up and set the office up for success in the future, so yes, I was able to collapse down some bank accounts, but the ones that were the biggest headaches, I couldn't deal with, but they are now. So that's why, starting on July 1st, new credit card processing across the city. The thing that frustrates me, and it should frustrate everybody in this room, I know it frustrates the mayor, is when I hear that there was some turnover in office and they cleaned out the desk and they find tens of thousands of dollars of checks that were just sitting there that nobody knew about. Money just not being turned over, right? That's horrible. Check processing. Those offices that handle checks, they're having check readers and they're going to be depositing their own checks through a check reader on a daily basis. The police department, DPW, other departments in the city. That's all starting in fiscal 26. I'm trying to set whomever comes next up for success. That's kind of my goal, right? So that's where things are. That's how we've gotten to the point we're at. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. I am just as frustrated as you because there's some really good news, right? There's some good news that the free cash story will tell. In fiscal 24, and everything I'm talking right now is about general fund. I'm not talking about our reserves. In fiscal 24, we earned, and I'm not talking about the 1.5 ARPA interest. That's a separate thing that I worked on to help us gain. That was all through some cash management. Over $1.1 million in interest earned in fiscal 24. We only budgeted expecting $500,000 in revenue. What's that mean? That's over $600,000 that will become free cash. I want to be able to tell that story. I want people to know what the treasurer's office has been able to do. That's just one example. That's 5 times more. Excuse me, that's, more than the last 5 years, 5 fiscal years of interest we earned just in 24. In fiscal 25, once the final postings are done and I'm able to get the valuations in before the end of the fiscal year, it's going to be closer to 1.5 million in interest earned. Our reserves. You guys made a wise investment. $10,000 for an OPEB trust. Councilor Jordan, Councilor Vacan, I know everybody on the finance committee. You look at that balance sheet. What is our biggest liability after retirement? What if I told you I was able to take that $10,000 and the establishment that you guys did, and today we have over $350,000. I know that's still a drop in the bucket, but it's a heck of a lot better than the $10,000 initial seed money that you guys put in.
That's right.
These are the stories that I want to be able to tell. I don't want us to be stuck in the mud, but we are, and it frustrates me. And I hope you guys realize that, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
So, thanks, Rory. And,
Yeah.
and by the way, let me just say, I see you around like the furniture. I mean, you're here all the time. You work really hard, and you have a good heart. I've said that many times, and you're a good person. So I appreciate your initiative. Couple of things though I want to dive into. One is this notion of the Schedule A. It does feel like we are getting it in later and later and later. That while this isn't the first time this has happened, this is like the latest it's happened. And it sounds like it's still not in, if that's accurate, correct? So what got worse? Last year, at least we got it in. We got it in late, but it wasn't November 30th. I think it was like last year we turned it in approximately February-ish maybe. And this year it's still not in. So and hand in hand with that question is, what's the ramifications of that is we're not allowed to access our local aid. And if are they going to pay us back all this local aid if we turn this Schedule A in, say, another month from now? It goes in. At what point do they say, you know what, is there ever a situation where you would forfeit your local aid? I want to talk about free cash certification in a minute, but I want to focus in on the $8 million a month or so in local aid that we receive. And I understand we haven't received it since February. That creates cash flow issues, and we could be earning interest on that $8 million a year that we're now not getting. 8 million times, I mean, that's a lot of money that we're losing interest on. So can you touch on that, and could we potentially lose this local aid?
Yeah, so I'll address all of those things. Let me first start with the timing. This year is the latest. Last year, it was actually submitted on June 24th. That's when things were, let me back up. It was submitted on June 17th. It was certified on June 24th. The year before that, it wasn't submitted until May. The year before that, it wasn't submitted until after February. So this is something that's been going on, and that predates.
But it's progressively getting worse. Yeah.
And that's exactly right. And that's where I get frustrated, right? And that's why we have the solutions in place to be able to ensure that doesn't happen. We need to make sure that all the departments that need to be part of that are bought in and are working together. And I feel that we're going to get there. Excuse me. But this is, and a year or two before that, we had negative free cash. Right?
Yep.
And, the thing that's not even setting aside the year that we couldn't set the tax rate in time, and we had to do a revenue anticipation note. What was that, 2017? Right?
Maybe.
So this has been an issue for a long time, and that's why when I say about being proactive and it's really about systems changes, and that's what I've been focused so much on is ensuring that we're never in this position again. That's what I've been dedicating my time to. So that's kind of, we've been trickling forward, and it shouldn't be. And that's also why I wanted to point out that where we are today is, as far as fiscal 25, I mean, 24 is not done yet, right? So we got to finish that, but I don't want to wait. 24, let's wait for 24 to be done, and then we'll get to 25. I'm already working on 25, right? Where last year I couldn't tell you that. I wasn't able to, say we were getting all of our reconciliations done for 24 when we were having this conversation in June. This year I can tell you that, right? So as far as the local aid is concerned, yes, there's a couple of things on that. It is the state law. If it's not filed by the end of January, they'll start suspending your local aid in February.
Right.
There is a point at which we are owed that money. We're going to get that money. And in fact, the DOR has already told us they're going to give us all the withheld local aid regardless of the Schedule A certification on the 30th, on Monday. So we'll be getting all the fiscal 25. Yeah, we'll be getting that on Monday.
And why is that? Because they're charitable, or if the law says you don't get the money until you file the Schedule A, why are they violating the state law?
It's not that they're violating the state law. These things are at the discretion of the director of the Bureau of Accounts, who we've met with.
Okay.
And I will tell you exactly what she said. She said she knows Holyoke, and this is Deb Wagner, who's, you guys have heard that name before. She's been around
a long, long time.
Yep. She said, verbatim, Holyoke is on the verge of financial success, not failure, success. She has felt that. She can see that. She's frustrated that we're not there yet. She has said, you guys should invest in bringing in some outside help to make sure you can get to that point. But regardless, she knows where we're at. She knows that it's not completely off the rails. And that's why she has made that decision, which is her right under the law to be able to do, right?
So she's going to give us the February, March, April, May, June, all this money on June 30th.
Correct. And that's when we got it last year too. We got it on June 30th. The other thing I would say, and this is from talking with both folks at DLS, some of the lower level folks that have been in, as well as other folks. The filing of the Schedule A, like actually filing it, like getting it done, they kind of view it like just checking off a box, like just get in what you got, right? Mm-hmm. Like the treasurer and the accountant or the auditor can say, here's my number and here's my number. We know we don't agree. It's off somehow, but we're just going to get it in. We're just going to file it.
Yep.
Totally legitimate. That's a totally legitimate thing. There's even a place on the sheet where it says, we're not in agreement, but we're figuring it out. We don't do that here in Holyoke. We don't just file it. I think that may be, I can't tell you for certain, but I think that may be because we farm it out and our outside audit firm, which is the same audit firm that does our outside audits, is saying, you must have everything down to the penny. It must match exactly before we'll let you do it.
What's the size of the discrepancy?
Well, whatever the discrepancy is, it could be anything. Springfield, for
what's
example.
the current one now?
I couldn't tell you because I don't know what the auditor's cash position is. And that's not a slight on the auditor. I legitimately don't know what that position is.
But Rory, for example, when you submitted what you submitted and they're going through it, how far off is that from what the auditor, what you submitted?
I don't know what the auditor submitted, so I couldn't tell you.
She doesn't, that's not a public document? Or
no, it doesn't.
You're not shared what the auditor files?
No.
So the auditor and treasurer don't know what each other filed?
It's actually supposed to be the auditor gets the treasurer's and kind of matches it up. And because of, again, I'm going to go back to process here. I'm going to go back to the systems. And I'm going to go back to audit reports that this council has received and read before. The way we post receipts, the way we post our debits and credits, let's just break it down to the most simplest thing. Money comes in and money goes out. We do it backwards. The treasurer should be concerned about, and this isn't what Rory feels, that this is like the way the laws are written. The treasurer should be concerned about the money that comes in and goes out of the bank. Keep track of that. If we have $1 million deposit, it might be from 30 different sources, but I know $1 million got deposited today, and I know $100,000 went out today, and I keep track of that. This is a system that our current auditor inherited too, right? So this has been around for a while. I don't know exactly when it started, but it's been around for a while. The way it works is the treasurer receives all those receipts and has to identify everything, puts it all onto a sheet for the day, exactly what comes in. The auditor then has to take that, review it, and manually enter that into the system, right? So when I earlier said, if we were using the systems that we currently have, the technology we currently have in place, if we were using it to its full extent, which we already pay for and we should be able to do, your question that you just asked, I should be able to answer that. I should be able to pull up a report right now and tell you exactly what the balance is day in and day out.
But you don't know the number that she's providing the external auditor compared to the number you're providing the external auditor to be reconciled?
No.
That's a communication breakdown, don't you agree?
I 100% agree. I
Interesting.
absolutely agree with you. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I'm not, you're not going to get any argument from me on that. But again, I know that much of that is because of the way we currently operate. The way we're changing, the things that we've been trying to put in place, whether it's through Munis or it's through the bank structure or it's through retraining staff or the way we're trying to reorganize the finance departments, all of those things tie together, right? But that is a problem. And this should be done, we should be in a place where we should be able to do this on a monthly, at a minimum, a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis.
Right, agreed.
I'd like to get to a point, I know we can get to a point where we could do it on a weekly basis, right? Where we're reconciling these things. In fact, there's a module within Munis that we cannot use right now because we need to have it set up and we need all the offices involved working together to get it set up. But it's actually called Treasurer's Cash to GL Reconciliation. You could run that report on a daily basis and identify where those concerns are. We have that technology. We've been paying for it for years.
I want to be sensitive
Yeah.
to time, if I may, Madam Chair. Sure.
We're talking about 7 and 8.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's correct, yep.
I just want to make sure on 7 that Council Bacon and Joanne that order's been
Can you put your microphone on? Sorry.
Sorry, forget that. That order, treasurer and auditor provide the city council with an update and timeline for certification of cash. I know the auditor's not here, but is that complied with?
That's probably where we're headed with,
Okay, and
because
then
we
we
can
go on
always
to 8.
refile another order.
Okay.
Yeah,
So now we can go on to item 8.
okay. Well, we're not quite done with free cash yet, because my question is on timeline is, what's the probability by Monday that we're going to have the free cash certified? Is this, I mean, one of the main drivers of the meeting for Monday was
Yep.
supposed to be free cash.
That's correct.
Or I know there was a high degree of confidence at one point. Are we still feeling that, or are we saying this is a coin toss at this point?
I don't want to sugarcoat. I honestly, I don't feel it's appropriate for me to sugarcoat it. I
Yeah.
think it's a coin toss.
A coin toss.
At best, yeah.
Okay.
Just to be honest.
Yeah.
But again, that's why I said I wanted to be very clear for
Yep.
both the council and the public and anyone else. That's not a good thing, right? But it
No.
also doesn't mean that the money goes away or disappears. It just means we'll get it in the fall when we, get everything else filed.
To use for next year.
No, we could use it, well, for
be-
fiscal 26, yes.
For fiscal 26.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay. And
Which is the way we had traditionally been. We get it certified, it comes in the fall, comes in, and then you can use it throughout the year. It's a pot of money. It all needs to be expended before the end of the fiscal year, or else it gets rolled into
Right.
the following year's free cash, which has
Well-
also happened before.
Well, some of us are hoping, and of
Yeah.
course I have the mayor in the room, so I have a captive audience. I'll advocate for, the current levy looks to be, in order, if all things held equal, is going up another $2 million. It sure would have been nice if we can instead of doing a 4.5% tax increase, if we could do a 2 or 3% tax increase, and we can use some of that free cash to offset the tax rate a bit.
And it would be great for us to know exactly what our revenues are, so we are doing accurate revenue projections at the time the tax rate is set. It'd be great to have that money in the bank so that we can make those investments while the interest rates are high and apply those funds too, because those are they're also revenue, you know?
Okay, so we're gonna get our local aid all in arrears by Monday.
Correct.
And heretofore, starting July, our regular local aid is gonna be coming in going forward, correct?
If it were, once everything's filed, then what she said was she's going to give us fiscal 25 local
money.
aid.
Yep.
I don't envision a scenario in which we're too far along into July before things are certified. So we would receive it, but I also want to be very clear that it's contingent on, like, the 26 would turn on once they have the Schedule A. And they just, again, you know, I want to be clear on this. They have it. That doesn't mean it's been completely certified. Springfield, which, you know, they use reserves to do exactly what you just suggested, right? Their Schedule A for fiscal 23 didn't get fully approved until this past January. I mean, we can have those things. It's the filing of it. It's getting it into the portal. They've told us they just check a box. They see that we receive it, or excuse me, they see that we've sent it. They'll start reviewing it. Even if it takes 9 months to sort everything out, it doesn't stop the local aid from coming in.
Okay.
And whether or not that's a best practice is a separate conversation, but that is the way the state law is written, and it's the way many communities operate. They file what they have based on the information they have. They focus on getting the balance sheet done. The Schedule A itself is a very complex document that gets filed, and that is, you know, all the information needs to be given to the auditor, but that is, you know, the two things get conflated, the balance sheet and the Schedule A. I've been guilty of that myself, but they are separate.
My last question, before I ultimately have a suggestion for the future, is there going to be any large cash adjustments as we've seen in prior certifications in recent history? That is to say, there was a big adjustment relative to grants. There was some on cash. Are you anticipating anything on grants or cash that will be large adjustments based on what you're seeing so far?
Not based on what I'm seeing, but again, I don't want to kind of overstep my bounds, right?
Okay.
I don't think so. I will say that the staff that we have in place now, you heard from Victoria earlier, Mira, who also works at DPW, Sergeant Zerhide at the police department. And I'm raising these folks because these are the people that manage those grants or Chapter 90 funds or those things that have caused those big adjustments in the past.
Yep.
They are crackerjack team. They are on it. The requests that I know my office gets, because a lot of times we have to provide the cleared checks, because up until recently we didn't even have a check image that could be used as proof of payment in the system. Now we do. Every time we print a check, we also produce an image of that check that can be used for grant, reimbursable grant submissions. They're on it every single day. And I, you know, I think there was a team before them that kind of started that effort, but they've taken that ball and run with it.
Okay.
And so based on, this is more anecdotal than anything else, but based on what I see, I really feel, and same thing with the school department. You know, Sean Mangano over there.
Because the scholarships
was
was an issue.
Oh, scholarships is doing great.
Okay, so we're good there.
Where there's an issue there is making sure that we're posting the market values correctly, and that is something that we were behind on, and I'm getting caught up for the end of fiscal '25.
Okay.
So when I say like some of these things will get posted, and we'll see some of our reserves jump. I mean, I looked at our trust, just our trusts, which the scholarships are part of, and the cemetery and Wedding Street and all this.
Right.
I mean, we're over $1 million in our trusts right now, as of today. You know, we've actually had some really great market performance with our trusts.
So just by way of wrap up and thinking about next steps, I was thinking it would be wise get through July here, and once we all have all these things, then have either yourself, the auditor, maybe we invite in the external auditor, and look back on this, and then have some bullet points that say, this is how fiscal 26 is going to be different. Like you're pointing out, okay, I'm doing this, and it's going to be these action items. Because like you said, we've seen the cycle, and it seems to be trending in the negative direction. So I just want to make sure that for fiscal 26, okay, we're starting, it's a new fiscal year, where are we going? And hopefully by then, we're all on the same page. So,
Yeah, and I would, when you file that order, because I'm sure you will, and you should, I welcome that conversation. I would ask you to also include an update on the Munis upgrades, because
Sure.
our consultant on that is eager to come present to the council about the successes we've had and how we're going to move forward. And the last thing I'll say on this point, unless other folks have questions, is I've also talked to the mayor about this. Whether it comes in front of the council, we're able to identify maybe a grant or some other kind of funding source. I really want to, when I say about drawing this deep line in the sand between the fiscal years and kind of taking those accounts, like our AP checking accounts, our payroll checking accounts, all of the withholding, we had like so many withholding accounts. I want, and the reconciliation work is done. We've had reconciliation work done. I still occasionally find things from 5 years ago that didn't get caught on some reconciliation. It might be $10, right? But it could be more. There could be other things, right? I'm not necessarily going back to 2018, 2019, 2020 and doing this. But what I would like to do, and I've already tried to start laying the groundwork for this, is to bring in a CPA, somebody that could go from 25 back, maybe 4 fiscal years, and review all the work that's been done to make sure that nothing's been missed. I think we're not going to see anything go down. I think, if anything, we're going to find that there was receipts that maybe hadn't been posted. There's also, under state law, and we would work with our outside auditors on this, if there are things that are more than 3 years old, like some of these grant deficits, things like that, we can actually work with them to get that written off.
Cure them?
Well, to cure them or write them off, where we get it off of our books entirely, right? There's a mechanism for that, but even if the finance reorganization plan were to take place and all these other things that we talk about, I still would recommend that somebody does a look back. Somebody independent, somebody that's never looked at our books or maybe has been somewhat involved before, but just to take a look at everything. I think that would really ensure that from 26 forward, because what do we all want? We want a clean audit, right? We want a management letter that maybe is talking about a little thing here and there, but not major deficiencies that we've been seeing for decades. We all know that. We all share that. Even if we have disagreements, I know that every single city councilor agrees on that, right? We might differ on how we want to get there and whatnot, but we all agree that we want clean audits. That's a no-brainer, right? So,
well, we've had the Inspector General's office in multiple times. They came in previously at the request of the mayor.
Yeah.
And that's usually who drives those. So that could be the answer. You know, that was what blew the lid on the treasurer's office in 2008. And that was the beginning of a lot of accountability. I mean, we had stuff, and obviously I hope, you know, public, you know, basically access to the treasurer's stamp, uncashed checks, things aren't posting, where people's life insurance isn't getting paid, tax withholdings. I mean, we've seen that before. I haven't heard about any of those recently, but you know, where we weren't making our income tax payments, that people are having withheld out of their pay.
Yep.
Those, I mean, it sounds like a lot of those major payroll deficiencies aren't happening anymore.
No, we've cleaned, and even the things that I did inherit, some issues with 941s,
Yep.
quarterly tax filings from years ago.
Yep.
I mean, I've gone down, I've met with the IRS, we've resolved many of those things.
Yep.
I'm very happy to say that I have all but in one instance eliminated paper checks. Like, we don't use them anymore. We were still using them. I mean, and what I mean by paper checks, I don't mean the ones we print and mail out. I mean handwritten
Yeah.
checks, where I have in my vault stacks
Yeah.
of checks, and there's no true accountability, right? I mean, there's some protections in place, but
Yeah.
the concerns that you raised, some of those things were still there when I got there.
Yeah.
But I've read those same reports, and I want to get rid of
Right.
them. And
I
so,
mean, we've had straight thefts
Yes.
out of your office.
Yes.
These are public record, by the way.
Yes.
If people want to go back and look at them. So, you know, we need to make sure that all our ducks in a
100%.
row. And to your point, maybe the answer is we come back with another IG audit closer to the conclusion of your service, so that it does a look back over the last, as you're suggesting, 3-4 years. So whoever the new treasurer collector, or whoever becomes the new person in March 1st of 2026, they can say, okay, well, this is when I started, and this is all the past stuff. Maybe
whether
that's
it's an
the answer.
IG or CPA, we
Yeah.
hire whatever path we need to take. I just think it would
Yep.
be a good thing for us to do, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate the update. And I would, okay.
No. Are we done yet?
Yeah, we are done, in my opinion. I was going to recommend 7 be complied with and 8 be tabled.
Okay, first is the motion that 7 is been complied with, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And 8 is that it's tabled until sometime.
We'll come back in the future and have the auditor, and just, how did everything go for 24? How did it all end up shaking out? The story is still an open book.
So a motion to table, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You want to do the motion to adjourn?
Our favorite motion.
No. Counselor Casio.
Motion to adjourn, let's go.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank